there is a specific feeling, an insidious dread, that accompanies the realization of being trapped. Imagine yourself standing on what you thought was solid ground, only to feel a slow, terrifying pull from beneath your feet. It is quicksand. Your first instinct, your most primal and deeply human reaction, is to fight. You thrash, you kick, you struggle with all your might against the force that is pulling you down. But a horrifying paradox soon reveals itself. The more you resist, the more you struggle, the faster you sink. Your desperate fight for survival becomes the very engine of your demise. The very act of resistance ensures that the thing you resist persists and ultimately consumes you. This is not just a story of a traveler in a distant jungle. This is the story of modern life. We are all, in our own ways, caught in the quicksand of existence, a landscape of endless notifications, of relentless professional pressure, of social expectations that whisper we are never quite enough. We are pulled under by the weight of anxiety about the future and the heavy chains of regret for the past. We are sinking in a mire of consumerism, a constant, manufactured thirst for the next thing that promises a moment of fleeting satisfaction. And our response is to struggle. We work longer hours, we schedule every moment, we distract ourselves with a fire hose of entertainment. We numb ourselves to the quiet desperation that hums just beneath the surface. We resist our own vulnerability. We fight against our sadness. We declare war on our own uncomfortable feelings, believing that if we just struggle hard enough, we will find solid ground. Yet, we only find ourselves more exhausted, more anxious, more deeply stuck than ever before. But what if this fundamental assumption, this instinct to fight, is wrong? What if the solution was never to struggle harder? What if the secret to freedom was not to fight the pull of the sand, but to understand its nature, to relax into its embrace, and in doing so, to find an unexpected buoyancy? What if the path out was actually a path in? This is the beginning of a different kind of journey. It is a journey guided by an ancient wisdom, a philosophy that has examined the nature of the human mind for over 2.5 millennia. It is a gentle invitation, not to a new belief system, but to a new way of seeing. A way that suggests peace is not found in winning the war against reality, but in laying down our arms, and finally, learning to be still. The quicksand does not announce itself. It has no malice, no intent. It simply is. Its nature is to yield, to accept weight, to pull downward. Our experience of it as a threat, as an enemy, comes entirely from our reaction to it. The terror is born in the moment we decide to fight. We have now explored this initial, instinctual panic, the desperate struggle against the inevitable pull. But to truly understand this force in our lives, we must look deeper, beyond the obvious thrashing, and into the subtle, moment-to-moment bracing that defines so much of our inner world. This resistance is not just a grand, dramatic battle. It is the very air our minds breathe, the constant, low-grade tension that separates us from the reality of our own lives. It is a state of being, a deeply ingrained habit of saying no to what is. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a simple yet profoundly insightful analogy known as the second arrow. It explains the nature of suffering with piercing clarity. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and suddenly you are struck by an arrow. The initial impact is sharp, painful, and unavoidable. This is the first arrow. In life, these first arrows are inevitable. They are the moments of physical pain, the diagnosis from a doctor, the loss of a loved one, the unexpected end of a job, the harsh word from a friend. They are the unavoidable, objective pains and difficulties that are woven into the very fabric of existence. No amount of wisdom or practice can guarantee a life free from these first arrows. They simply happen. The real problem, the source of our deepest anguish, begins a moment later. After being struck by the first arrow, we then take out a second arrow and we shoot it into ourselves in the very same spot. This is the second arrow. This arrow is made of our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is the thought, why me? This is terrible. I can't bear this. This shouldn't be happening. It is the anger, the fear, the self-pity, the blame, and the despair that we layer on top of the initial clean pain. The first arrow causes pain. The second arrow causes suffering. The first is unavoidable. The second is entirely self-inflicted. It is an act of resistance. When we resist the reality of the first arrow, we poison the wound with our own judgment, our own narrative of how things should have been. We refuse to accept the simple, stark reality of the pain, and in that refusal, we multiply it tenfold. The suffering we experience is not the event itself, but our violent, mental, and emotional resistance to the event. This pattern does not only play out in major life tragedies, it is a constant, humming undercurrent in our daily lives, manifesting in forms so common we barely recognize them as resistance. Consider worry. Worry is simply resistance to the uncertainty of the future. The future is, by its very nature, unknown and uncontrollable. But we refuse to accept this. We sit for hours, running through catastrophic scenarios, playing out conversations that will never happen, trying to mentally control every possible outcome. We are shooting ourselves with second arrows about a future that has not even arrived. We are resisting a reality, the present moment, by escaping into a fantasy of future pain. Each worried thought is a small act of saying no to the peace of the present. Consider regret. Regret is resistance to the immutability of the past. The past is gone. It is fixed, unchangeable, like a photograph. Yet we resist this truth. We endlessly ruminate on past mistakes, replaying conversations, cringing at our choices, bathing in the shame of what we did or failed to do. We are anchored to a ghost, firing second arrows at a version of ourselves that no longer exists. We refuse to accept the past as it was, and in doing so, we prevent ourselves from fully inhabiting the only time we can actually live in, right now. Even procrastination is a subtle form of resistance. A difficult task sits before us. It might be challenging, boring, or we may fear we will not do it well. This feeling of anticipated discomfort is a first arrow. Instead of simply accepting this discomfort and moving through the task, we resist it. We check our email. We scroll through social media. We find a sudden urge to clean the kitchen. We are resisting the feeling of the task itself. And in doing so, we create a new, prolonged suffering, the nagging anxiety and guilt of knowing we are avoiding what needs to be done. We trade a small, manageable discomfort for a larger, more pervasive one. Then there is perhaps the most pervasive form of resistance, judgment. When we judge another person, we are resisting them as they are. We are holding them up against a mental model of how they should be and finding them lacking. When we judge ourselves, we do the same, resisting our own perceived flaws and imperfections. When we judge a situation, the traffic, the weather, the economy, we are in a state of conflict with reality itself. Each small judgment, each internal complaint is a micro act of war against the isness of life. It is the mind's constant refusal to simply let things be as they are. There is an old Zen story that perfectly illustrates this human tendency to resist reality by labeling it. A farmer in a small village had a prize stallion. One day, the horse ran away. All the neighbors came to console him. "What terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few weeks later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to celebrate. "What incredible good fortune," they exclaimed. The farmer, calmly, just said, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and broke his leg. The neighbors came once more, shaking their heads. "How awful. This is truly bad luck." The farmer looked at his son's leg and replied, "Maybe." A week later, the emperor's army marched into the village, conscripting every able-bodied young man for a war they were unlikely to survive. The farmer's son, with his broken leg, was the only one left behind. The neighbors, in awe, said, "You were right all along. Your son being spared, it's the greatest luck of all." The farmer looked out at the road where the soldiers had disappeared and said, quietly, "Maybe." This farmer was free. He was free because he did not resist reality. He did not apply the second arrow of good or bad to the events of his life. He understood that he was only seeing a tiny fragment of a much larger, incomprehensible pattern. He did not cling to good fortune or despair over bad fortune. He simply met each moment as it was, with a radical acceptance. Our resistance, our suffering, comes from our arrogant belief that we, unlike the farmer, know exactly what is good and what is bad. We shoot the second arrow because we think we see the whole picture. The truth is, we barely see the frame. This fundamental misunderstanding, this belief that reality should bend to our will, that it should be stable, predictable, and aligned with our desires, is the fertile soil in which all resistance grows. When the world inevitably proves itself to be wild, unpredictable, and indifferent to our preferences, our entire being tenses up in opposition. But what is this part of us that insists so vehemently on control? What is this inner architect that builds the prison of our preferences and then protests when the bars are rattled? To understand resistance, we must now turn to face its source, the ghost in the machine, the voice that whispers I, me, and mine. We must investigate the nature of the ego itself. This constant internal monologue, this voice of judgment and preference that powers our resistance, has a name. In the psychological language of the West, we call it the ego. But to begin our investigation here, we must set aside the common understanding of ego as mere arrogance or pride. The Buddhist understanding is far more subtle and far more profound. It does not see the ego as an enemy to be vanquished in battle, but rather as a phantom to be understood, an illusion to be seen through with gentle, unwavering attention. The ego is the architect of the cage we find ourselves in, but it is also the prisoner, rattling the bars of its own creation. It is a ghost, haunting the house of our own being, and our task is not to exorcise it, but to turn on the light of awareness and see that it was never truly there to begin with. So, what is this ego from a contemplative perspective? It is not a solid, continuous entity that resides somewhere behind your eyes. You cannot find it on a brain scan. You cannot isolate it in a lab. The ego is more like a process, a verb masquerading as a noun. It is a frantic, lifelong activity of bundling. It gathers disparate elements of our experience, thoughts, emotions, memories, roles, physical sensations, beliefs, and stitches them together into a seemingly coherent package, which it then labels me. Think of it as a corporation, I, Incorporated. It has a brand identity, which we call our personality. It has a corporate history, which we call our memories. It has assets, like our body and our possessions. It has a mission statement, a set of desires and fears that drive its behavior. But if you were to perform an audit, to try and find the single, core thing that is I, Incorporated, you would find nothing. You would only find a collection of activities, legal fictions, and constantly shifting relationships. The ego is precisely this. It is a useful fiction for navigating the world, but we have made the catastrophic error of believing our own press release. We have mistaken the construct for a concrete reality. The ego's primary and most crucial function, the activity that defines its very existence, is to create separation. Its first act is to draw a line in the limitless expanse of reality and declare, this side is me, and that side is not me. Everything on the me side of the linear body, my thoughts, my reputation, my family, my country becomes something to be defended, protected, and enhanced at all costs. Everything on the other side of the line becomes either a potential threat to be neutralized, a resource to be exploited, or simply irrelevant. This fundamental act of division is the genesis of all resistance. For without a separate I, who is there to be threatened? Without a separate me, who is there to feel lack? The very concepts of gain and loss, success and failure, praise and blame, all depend entirely on this initial, illusory boundary. The ego is a border guard, constantly checking passports at the frontier of our own skin. And this relentless vigilance is the source of our tension and anxiety. Once this separate self is established, it finds itself in a terrifying predicament. It is a tiny, fragile island of meanness in the middle of a vast, chaotic, and uncontrollable ocean of not me. Its entire existence becomes a desperate struggle for survival, driven by two impossible cravings: the craving for permanence and the craving for control. It craves permanence because it is terrified of its own dissolution. It knows, on some deep, instinctual level, that it is a temporary construct, and this knowledge is a source of profound existential dread. So, it resists. It resists the natural process of aging, seeing every wrinkle as a personal failure, It resists illness, seeing it as an invasion of its sovereign territory. Most of all, it resists the idea of death, the ultimate proof of its own impermanence. It builds monuments to its self-wealth, status, legacy, a futile attempt to etch its name into eternity, to make the temporary seem permanent. To achieve this illusion of permanence, the ego craves absolute control. It needs to manage the world, to bend reality to its will, to ensure its comfort and security. This is the engine of the resistance we spoke of. The ego is the internal narrator that demands the story of our life unfold according to its preferred script. When other characters fail to say their lines, when the plot takes an unexpected turn, the ego reacts with frustration, anger, and fear. It is the farmer's neighbors, rushing to label every event as good or bad because they believe they should be in control of the narrative. The freedom of the farmer lay in his quiet ego, his release of the need to control and define reality. This is where the process becomes deeply personal. The ego is not just an abstract concept, it is the source of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. It constructs and fiercely defends identities. These identities can be positive. I am a smart person. I am a good parent. I am a successful professional. They can also be negative. I am an anxious person. I am not worthy of love. I am a victim of my circumstances. The ego then acts as a biased filter, constantly scanning the world for evidence that confirms these stories. If your core story is, I am an anxious person, your ego will highlight every potential threat, magnify every uncertainty, and dismiss every moment of peace as a temporary fluke. An uncomfortable truth is that we often cling to even our most painful identities because the alternative of not knowing who we are is, to the ego, a fate worse than suffering. To let go of the story of the anxious one is to experience a kind of identity death. And so, we resist healing. We resist change. We defend the very cage we complain about because its bars have become the defining features of our self-portrait. There is a beautiful parable that captures this tragic predicament. Imagine a single, perfect drop of water, born in a storm cloud and falling towards the earth. For a glorious moment, it is distinct, unique, a jewel of shimmering light. Then, it lands with a soft splash in the middle of the vast, endless ocean. The drop's first sensation is one of pure terror. It sees itself as this small, fragile, separate thing, about to be consumed and annihilated by the immense, impersonal sea. Its entire existence becomes a frantic effort to maintain its dropness. It resists the currents, it fights the tides, it desperately tries to hold its shape, to maintain its boundary against the crushing, overwhelming pressure of the whole. It lives in a state of constant, exhausting resistance, defined by its fear of dissolution. Then, one day, it can resist no longer. It finally lets go. And in that moment of surrender, a miracle occurs. It is not annihilated. It does not die. Instead, it becomes the ocean. It realizes that it was never truly separate in the first place. Its brief, shimmering existence as a drop was just a temporary perspective, a fleeting moment of self-awareness. Its true nature, its essential substance, was, is, and always will be the entire ocean. The ego is our dropness, our fear of letting go of our stories, our attachments, and our resistance is the drop's fear of the ocean. But the great secret of the spiritual path is that this surrender is not an end, but a homecoming. It is the realization that the separate self we have worked so hard to defend was the only thing standing between us and the boundless freedom of our true nature. The ego builds its fortress of resistance on a foundation of shifting sand precisely because it denies the fundamental nature of the reality it finds itself in. It insists on being a solid, permanent, controllable object in a universe that is, at its core, none of those things. It is trying to be a stone when everything around it is a river. To truly understand the futility of its struggle, we must now turn our gaze to the nature of that river itself. We must explore the first great mark of existence, the truth that the ego is built to deny, the universal law of impermanence. We left the ego, the architect of our cage, standing on what it believed to be solid ground, desperately trying to build a fortress of permanence and control. But this fortress is built on a fatal misunderstanding, for its foundation is not solid rock, but the ever-shifting bank of a relentless river. This river, this all-encompassing, unstoppable flow of change, has a name in the language of the Buddha. It is called anicca. It translates to impermanence, but this single word points to a truth so vast and so intimate that it touches every conceivable aspect of our existence. To understand anicca is not to learn a new philosophy. It is to finally open our eyes to the most fundamental, observable, and undeniable characteristic of reality itself. It is the key that unlocks the ego's cage, because it reveals that the bars were only ever made of flowing water. The evidence of anicca is so pervasive that we have become blind to it. Look outside. The seasons turn, one into the other, in a majestic, seamless cycle. The sun rises and sets, the moon waxes and wanes. Great mountains are slowly but surely ground into dust by wind and rain. Iron rusts, wood rots, coastlines are redrawn by the patient tides. Nothing in the natural world holds still. It is all a great cosmic dance of arising and passing away. We accept this intellectually, but we live as though we are somehow exempt from this universal law. Now, bring this observation closer to your own body. This body that you call yours is not a static object, but a dynamic, vibrant process. With every breath, you draw in the world and release it again. Millions of your cells are dying right now, and millions more are being born to replace them. The person you see in the mirror today is not the same person who was there a decade ago, or even a year ago. Your body is a river of sensations, of warmth and cold, of pleasure and pain, of energy and fatigue, all in constant, unceasing motion. The ego clings to the body, identifies with it, wants it to remain young, strong, and healthy forever. It resists the irrefutable evidence of aging, illness, and decay. This resistance, this war against the body's natural, impermanent flow, is a source of immense anxiety and suffering. We are at war with the very process that gives us life. Even more intimate and more volatile is the river of the mind. Observe your own thoughts for just a few moments. They appear from nowhere, unbidden. They flicker in the space of awareness for a second or a minute, and then they vanish, replaced by the next one. Where do they come from? Where do they go? You cannot hold on to a thought any more than you can catch smoke in your hand. The same is true of your emotions. A wave of joy can wash over you, exhilarating and bright, but it inevitably recedes. A storm of anger can feel all-consuming, as if it will last forever, but it too eventually exhausts itself and dissipates. Moods, feelings, ideas, perceptions, they are the most transient, ephemeral phenomena in the universe. Yet, this is where we build our house. We desperately try to grasp and hold on to the pleasant thoughts and feelings, and we violently push away and resist the unpleasant ones. We try to dam the river of the mind, to freeze it in a state of permanent happiness. This is a recipe for guaranteed failure and profound exhaustion. The suffering is not the sadness or the anger. The suffering is the futile, energy-draining effort of resisting its presence. Attachment, the deep clinging that the Buddha identified as the root of dissatisfaction, is simply a protest against anicca. When we become attached to a person, we are attached to a living, changing process. Yet we want them to remain as they are, to always be there for us, to never change their feelings. When we lose them, our pain is amplified by our resistance to the inescapable law that all meetings must end in parting. When we become attached to a possession, a home, a car, we suffer when it inevitably breaks, is lost, or is destroyed. When we become attached to a role or a status, I am the CEO, I am a young athlete, you suffer when time and circumstance inevitably strip that role away. We are constantly placing our bets on fixed points in a universe that has none. Our suffering is the rage and sorrow we feel when the river inevitably washes our markers away. But this truth, which at first seems so bleak and nihilistic, is also the gateway to profound freedom and a deeper kind of beauty. If everything is impermanent, then every single moment is infinitely precious. This very breath, this specific pattern of light in the room, this unique feeling in your body will never, ever come again in exactly the same way. When you truly understand this, life ceases to be a frantic quest for security and becomes a work of art, to be appreciated in the unfolding. You begin to pay attention. The taste of your morning coffee, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of a loved one's voice. These are not mundane details. They are fleeting miracles. Furthermore, if difficult states are also impermanent, then no pain is a life sentence. No sorrow is final. The phrase, "This, too, shall pass," is transformed from a hollow cliché into a deep, visceral truth that provides immense comfort in times of darkness. When you are in the grip of fear or overwhelmed by grief, the wisdom of Anika is a quiet voice reminding you that this storm will not last forever. The clouds will part, the river will flow on. This knowledge doesn't necessarily erase the pain, but it stops you from adding the second arrow of despair, belief that the pain will be permanent. It allows you to endure what feels unendurable, because you know it is a visitor, not a permanent resident. There is a story of the Buddha walking with his disciples along a beach. He stooped down and, with his finger, drew a perfect circle in the wet sand. His followers gathered around and admired its flawless shape, its perfect symmetry. It was a beautiful, complete form. As they were admiring it, a gust of wind swept along the shore, and a fine layer of dry sand blew over the circle, distorting its perfect line. One of the disciples sighed, "What a shame. The perfection is ruined." The Buddha looked at him and then at the circle. He explained that its perfection was not a permanent quality. Its perfection existed only in the fleeting moment between its creation and the inevitable arrival of the wind. To cling to the idea of a permanent, perfect circle is to miss the beauty of the entire process, the drawing, the brief moment of wholeness, and the gentle dissolution. Our lives are like this circle in the sand. We desperately try to preserve our moments of perfection, our youth, our loves, our successes, and we suffer when the winds of change inevitably arrive. True wisdom lies in appreciating the beauty of the entire, transient arc, not in trying to freeze it at its peak. This understanding radically reframes our relationship with life's greatest challenges. In a culture that worships youth, aging is seen as a disease, a process to be fought with creams, procedures, and denial. From the perspective of Anika, aging is simply the natural, graceful, and unavoidable unfolding of a process. To resist it is to be in a constant, losing battle with time itself. To embrace it is to find the unique wisdom, perspective, and quiet joy that each stage of life offers. Similarly, when we experience profound loss, the wisdom of Anika does not numb the pain. The first arrow of grief is real and must be honored, but it prevents the second arrow of protest. It allows us to hold our love for what was lost, while simultaneously accepting the reality that everything is subject to this law. It allows us to grieve cleanly, without the added poison of demanding that the universe be other than it is. The ego, the architect of the cage, built its fortress to protect a solid, unchanging self. But Anika reveals that the entire landscape is a flowing river. The reason we fight so desperately against this flow is because we believe we are a rock standing in the middle of it, a permanent I that is being threatened and eroded by all this change. This leads us to the most profound and challenging question of all. If everything is in flux, the world, the body, the mind, what about the observer? What about this I that is witnessing all this change? What if the rock we are trying to protect is also just an illusion? What if the rock itself is just a temporary, tightly packed collection of sand, held together by force of habit, and is also, in its essence, just a part of the river? We must now turn our attention from the impermanent nature of the world to the very nature of the self that perceives it. We have journeyed to the edge of the river of impermanence, the relentless flow of Anika, and seen how everything we perceive, the world, our bodies, our very thoughts and feelings, is in a state of constant, unstoppable flux. We saw how the ego, in its desperate bid for security, builds a fortress on the riverbank, resisting the current. But we were left with a haunting question. What about the fortress itself? What about the I that is doing the resisting, the I that feels threatened by all this change? Is it the one solid rock in this flowing world? The Buddha's answer to this question is perhaps his most radical, most challenging, and ultimately, most liberating teaching. It is the doctrine of anatta, or no self, and to understand it is to pull the final thread that unravels the entire tapestry of our suffering. Let us be clear from the outset. Anatta does not mean that you do not exist. It does not mean that you are a void, or that life is a meaningless hallucination. You are reading these words, you are breathing, you are experiencing. The teaching of no self is far more subtle. It states that within this living, breathing, experiencing process, there is no permanent, independent, unchanging core that you can point to and call I or myself. The rock you have spent your entire life defending is, upon closer inspection, just a temporary, tightly packed eddy of water in the river, a pattern that holds its shape for a while before dissolving back into the flow. You are not a thing, but a process. You are a verb, not a noun. To make this practical, the Buddha invited us not to believe him, but to investigate for ourselves. He broke down the human experience into 5 categories, or aggregates, known as the skandhas. He said that everything we identify as ourself can be found within these 5 bundles. Let us, together, conduct this investigation right now. The first aggregate is form, or rupa. This is your physical body and all matter. Look at your hand. Feel the chair beneath you. This is the world of form. The question is, are you this body? We have already seen through the lens of anicca that the body is in constant flux. It ages, it gets sick, it is made of cells that are constantly dying and being replaced. It is entirely dependent on food, water, and air to continue. Since it is so changeable and dependent, it cannot be the permanent, independent you that you feel you are. So, we look deeper. The second aggregate is feeling, or vedana. These are the raw, unfiltered sensations that arise from contact with the world. When you touch a hot stove, there is an unpleasant feeling. When you taste sweet fruit, there is a pleasant feeling. When you sit quietly, there may be a neutral feeling. These feelings are like the weather, they come and go constantly. Are you your feelings? If you were, you would cease to exist when a feeling disappeared, and you would become a different person every time a new feeling arose. So, the stable self cannot be found here either. The third aggregate is perception, or sana. This is the mental faculty that recognizes, labels, and conceptualizes. It's what looks at a collection of colors and shapes and says tree, or hears a sound and labels it music. It's the process of making sense of the raw data from our feelings. But are you your perceptions? Your perceptions are shaped by your culture, your language, your past experiences, and are constantly changing. A piece of modern art might be perceived as beautiful by one person and as nonsense by another. Perceptions are unreliable and transient. The self is not here. The fourth aggregate is mental formations, or sankhara. This is a vast and crucial category. It includes all of our thoughts, beliefs, opinions, biases, intentions, habits, and desires. This is the home of the ego's stories, the inner narrator. This is the bundle we are most deeply identified with. I am a person who believes in justice. I am a worrier. I want to be successful. But are you these mental formations? Think of a single thought. It arises, stays for a moment, and vanishes. Your opinions have surely changed over your lifetime. Your desires are in constant motion. These mental activities are the busiest, most chaotic part of the river. They are phenomena that you can observe passing through your awareness. If you can observe them, how can they be the ultimate, core you, who is the observer? So, the self is not to be found here. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness, or vijnana. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself. The knowing quality that is present when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think. It's the light of awareness that illuminates the other 4 aggregates. One might think, aha, this is it. This awareness is my true self, my soul. But the Buddha asks us to look even closer. Is this consciousness a single, monolithic thing? Or does it too arise dependently? Seeing consciousness arises only when there is an eye and a visible object. Hearing consciousness arises only when there is an ear and a sound. Thinking consciousness arises only when there is a mind and a thought. It is not a constant, independent entity. It is also part of the flow, flickering in and out of existence, dependent on conditions. So we have conducted the audit. We have searched through the 5 departments of I, Incorporated, and the CEO is not in the building. There is no central, controlling entity to be found. What we call a self is the dynamic, interdependent, flowing process of these 5 aggregates working in concert. It is an event, not an entity. The ego's first reaction to this insight is sheer terror. It feels like a threat of annihilation. If I am not this solid self, then I am nothing. But this is a profound misunderstanding. This teaching is not a death sentence. It is a declaration of liberation. The self that you have been so desperately defending, the ego that causes all your resistance and suffering, is a fiction. It's a ghost. Who is it that gets insulted? The fictional self. Who is it that fears failure? The fictional self. Who is it that is terrified of dying? The fictional self. When you see through this illusion, an immense burden is lifted from your shoulders. If there is no fixed, solid self to defend, what is there to fear? Resistance becomes meaningless when there is no one there to resist. It is the ultimate act of letting go, of surrendering to the flow. The ancient Buddhist text, The Questions of King Milinda, contains the most famous illustration of this teaching. A Greek king named Milinda, a man of great intellect, came to visit the enlightened sage Nagasena. Nagasena asked the king how he had arrived. The king replied, "By chariot." Nagasena smiled and began his inquiry. "Your Majesty, what is this chariot? Is the wooden pole the chariot?" "No, venerable sir," the king replied. "Are the wheels the chariot? Is the axle the chariot? Are the reins or the whip the chariot?" To each question, the king had to answer no. Nagasena then asked, "Is the chariot something other than the sum of these parts?" The king again had to say no. Nagasena concluded, "Chariot is just a convenient name, a designation we give to a collection of parts, properly assembled. It has no independent existence apart from its components." He then turned the analogy to the king himself. Just as the chariot is a convention, the name Nagasena is just a convention for the five aggregates flowing together. There is no permanent Nagasena soul riding in the chariot of the body and mind. The functioning assembly is the experience. We began this journey by examining our resistance to life. We saw this resistance was fueled by an ego that craves permanence and control. We then saw that this project was doomed because the universe is fundamentally impermanent, a great river of anicca. And now, we have looked for the ego itself and found that it too is part of the river, a temporary pattern with no solid core, a process called anatta. With this radical new perspective, where both the world and the self are seen as flowing processes, we must turn back to our original problem. What now is the nature of that fundamental dissatisfaction, that feeling of being caught in quicksand? We are now equipped to understand the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, on a much deeper level, seeing it not as a personal failure, but as an impersonal condition that arises when the illusion of a solid self clashes with the reality of an ever-changing world. Our journey inward has led us to a place of profound deconstruction. We began with our instinctual resistance to life's difficulties, and we traced that resistance back to its architect, the ego, a constructed sense of a separate, solid self. We then placed that ego within its true context, a universe defined by relentless, impersonal change, the great river of anicca. Finally, we turned our investigative lens on the ego itself and found it to be a phantom, a process without a core, a temporary pattern we call anatta. Now we stand in the midst of these revelations, when the illusion of a permanent, solid self crashes against the irrefutable reality of an impermanent, flowing world. A very specific friction is generated. It is the sound of a gear grinding against a wheel that it does not fit. This friction, this fundamental vibration of unease, has a name. It is the subject of the Buddha's first and most essential teaching. It is called dukkha. This Pali word, dukkha, is most often translated into English as suffering. And while it certainly includes suffering, this single word is too heavy, too dramatic, and ultimately too narrow to capture its full meaning. It can lead one to the mistaken belief that Buddhism is a pessimistic or morbid philosophy. To truly understand, we must expand our definition. Dukkha is better understood as a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction. It is a fundamental unease, a stress, a feeling of being subtly out of kilter with the world. It is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of a life lived in ignorance of its true nature. It is the feeling of the quicksand pulling at our feet. The Buddha was not saying that life is all agony and pain. He was pointing to a much deeper, more subtle truth about our unenlightened experience. To clarify this, he He described three distinct levels or types of dukkha. The first is the most obvious. Dukkha, the dukkha of pain. This is suffering in the way we typically understand it. It is the direct experience of physical and emotional pain. It is the headache that throbs in your temples, the sharp pain of a broken bone, the chronic ache of a diseased body. It is the emotional anguish of grief when a loved one dies, the sting of betrayal, the despair of depression, the anxiety that grips your heart. This is the first arrow we spoke of earlier. It is the pain of encountering what you do not want. It is raw, undeniable, and a universal part of life for all sentient beings. The second type is more subtle, and it is directly linked to our understanding of anicca. It is called viparinama dukkha, the dukkha of change. This is the stress or suffering that arises from the fact that even pleasant experiences are impermanent. Think of a perfect summer vacation. The sun is warm, the company is good, the days are carefree. There is great happiness. But woven into the very fabric of that happiness is the subtle, often unconscious knowledge that it must end. The sadness that creeps in on the last day. The resistance to returning to normal life. That is viparinama dukkha. We get the promotion we have worked so hard for, and for a moment there is elation. But this soon gives way to the pressure and responsibility of the new role. We fall in love, and the initial bliss is wonderful, but it carries with it the seed of fear, the fear that this person might leave us, or that their feelings might change. This is the suffering of losing what you want, or the anxiety of knowing that you will eventually lose it. It is the inherent stress built into all conditioned happiness, because it is, by nature, unreliable and fleeting. The third and most profound level is sankhara dukkha, the dukkha of conditioned existence. This is the background hum of dissatisfaction that is woven into the very fabric of our being as a conditioned, constructed self. It is not tied to a specific painful event or a specific pleasant one ending. It is the friction of being made of the five aggregates. It is the subtle, underlying tension of being a temporary process that mistakes itself for a solid entity. It is that existential angst that can arise even on a perfectly fine day. The feeling of, is this all there is? It's the inherent unreliability of a life built on shifting sands. It is the suffering of simply being a conditioned self in a conditioned world, a world where nothing can provide ultimate, lasting satisfaction because everything, including the you who is seeking, is impermanent. This is the most pervasive form of dukkha, the baseline state from which the other two forms of suffering arise. Now, this diagnosis might sound grim, but the Buddha called this the first noble truth. Why noble? It is noble because the act of seeing and accepting this truth, clearly and without flinching, is the very first step towards liberation. It is an act of profound courage and wisdom. It is not a pessimistic condemnation of life, but a perfectly realistic diagnosis of a universal condition. A doctor who looks at a patient and correctly identifies an illness is not a pessimist. They are a necessary truth teller, the only one who can set the patient on the path to a cure. To deny the diagnosis, to pretend the symptoms are not there, is to guarantee that the illness will fester. Our entire culture is often an elaborate attempt to deny dukkha, to cover it up with distractions, possessions, and experiences. But it always remains, just beneath the surface. To face it directly is to begin to rob it of its power. This truth is not a personal failure. It is not a punishment. It is an impersonal law, like gravity. Our resistance to it, our belief that life should be free from dissatisfaction, is the second arrow that turns dukkha into true suffering. There is a powerful story that illustrates this journey from personal anguish to noble understanding. A young woman named Kisa Gotami lived in a village and had only one child, a son, whom she adored above all else. One day, the boy fell ill and died. Kisa Gotami was consumed by a grief so powerful that it drove her mad. She refused to accept his death. She picked up his small, lifeless body and went from door to door throughout her village, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could restore her son. Most people turned away from her, some with pity, some with scorn. She was resisting reality with every fiber of her being. Finally, a wise old man, seeing her unbearable pain, told her, "I do not have a medicine for your son, but I know a physician who does. Go to the Buddha, Kisa Gotami ran to the Buddha and laid her son at his feet, pleading for the miracle medicine. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "I can help you. But first, you must do one thing for me. Go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died." Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gotami went back to the village. She stopped at the first house and asked, "Can you spare me a mustard seed? The Buddha needs it to make a medicine for my son." The woman of the house said, "Of course," and went to get one. As she was about to hand it over, Kisa Gotami asked, "Has anyone in this house ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said, "the living are few, but the dead are many. We lost my husband just last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. Every family had a story of loss. One had lost a parent, another a sibling, another a spouse. Her frantic, personal grief began to transform. She was not the only one. Her pain was not a unique curse. It was the shared, universal inheritance of all human beings. Her heart, which had been closed tight in the fist of her own suffering, began to soften and open to the suffering of everyone she met. She realized that the Buddha had sent her on a quest not for a magical seed, but for this very understanding. Her resistance broke. She took her son's body to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, no longer a grieving mother seeking a miracle, but a woman whose heart had touched a universal truth. The pain of her loss was still there. The first arrow remained, but the second arrow of protest and isolation had been removed. She was now ready to hear the rest of the diagnosis. Like Kisa Gotami, we have now fully surveyed the nature of our condition. We have seen that the friction between our illusory self and the ever-changing world generates a fundamental dissatisfaction, a dukkha. In seeing it clearly, we have taken the first noble step. Now, we are ready to ask the same questions a doctor would ask next. What is the cause of this condition? What is the prognosis? And most importantly, what is the prescription for the cure? This leads us directly to the full framework of the Buddha's liberating message, the Four Noble Truths. Our journey has taken us into the very heart of the human condition. With Kisa Gotami, we walk from house to house, not to find a magical cure for death, but to discover the universal truth of its presence in every life. In doing so, we move from a state of personal, isolated agony to a shared, compassionate understanding. We have faced the first noble truth. We have acknowledged the diagnosis, the reality of dukkha, the pervasive dissatisfaction that hums beneath the surface of our lives. This honest admission is the most crucial first step. It is the moment a patient, tired of their own denial, finally turns to a trusted physician and says, "I am ready. Tell me the truth. What is wrong with me, and what can be done?" The entire teaching of the Buddha can be seen as a response to this plea. He did not present himself as a god or a savior to be worshipped, but as a master physician of the mind, a supreme psychologist. His core teaching, the Four Noble Truths, is not a set of religious dogmas to be accepted on blind faith. It is a medical framework of profound elegance and practicality. It is a diagnostic chart for the human spirit, outlining a disease, its cause, a prognosis, and a clear, actionable treatment plan. It is a map offered to us, a map that leads from the quicksand of our suffering to the solid ground of lasting freedom. Let us now, with the courage of Kisa Gotami, listen to the physician's full consultation. The first truth, as we have seen, is the diagnosis, the truth of dukkha. This is the honest acknowledgement that our lives, as they are ordinarily lived, are characterized by a fundamental unease. We have explored its three forms: the obvious suffering of pain, loss, and sickness; the subtle suffering inherent in the fact that our pleasures are fleeting and unreliable; and the deepest, most pervasive suffering of simply being a conditioned, temporary self in a vast, impersonal, and ever-changing universe. To call this truth noble is to recognize the profound courage it takes to face it. Our entire society is often a conspiracy to pretend this truth does not exist. We are told that if we just buy the right product, find the perfect partner, or achieve the next level of success, this underlying dissatisfaction will vanish forever. But it never does. The nobility lies in withdrawing from this fantasy, in turning to face the reality of our condition without flinching. It is the beginning of wisdom. In the physician's office, this is the moment we stop minimizing our symptoms and say, yes, the pain is real, the unease is real. I am no longer going to pretend it is not here. Having made the diagnosis, the skilled physician moves to the second crucial step, identifying the cause. What is the pathogen, the root cause of this pervasive fever of dissatisfaction? This is the second noble truth, the truth of the origin of dukkha, samudaya. The Buddha states with unambiguous clarity that the root cause is an internal condition. It is not bad luck. It is not the fault of others. It is not a flaw in the universe's design. The cause is tanha. Tanha is a Pali word that translates as thirst, craving, or clinging. It is not the simple, healthy desire for food when you are hungry, or for companionship when you are lonely. Tanha is a deeper, more compulsive and feverish thirst, a powerful inner drive that is rooted in the ignorance of our true nature. It is the relentless grasping of the illusory ego, the separate self, as it tries to prop itself up, to feel more real, to secure its territory in a world it perceives as threatening and lacking. It is the engine of our resistance, the frantic energy that keeps us struggling in the quicksand. The Buddha described three distinct channels through which this thirst flows. The first is kamatana, the craving for sense pleasures. This is the most easily recognizable form of thirst. It is the relentless desire for our senses to be fed with pleasant experiences. The thirst for delicious tastes, for beautiful sights, for captivating sounds, for pleasant smells, for comforting physical sensations. In our modern world, this thirst has been amplified into a deafening roar. It is the compulsive need to check our phones for the pleasant hit of a new notification or a like. It is the binge-watching of shows to be constantly stimulated. It is the endless pursuit of consumer goods, gourmet food, exotic travel, and sexual gratification. There is nothing inherently wrong with enjoying these things. The problem, the dukkha, arises because these pleasures are, by their nature, impermanent. As we learned from Anicca, they cannot last. The pleasure fades, and we are left with a craving for more, a feeling of lack. We become addicted to the stimulation, and our baseline for happiness gets higher and higher, leaving us feeling bored and dissatisfied when the stimulation is removed. It is the perfect recipe for a life of restless seeking and inevitable disappointment. The second, and more subtle, form is bhavatanha, the craving for existence or becoming. This is the ego's deep, existential thirst to be, to solidify its identity, to carve out a permanent and important place in the world. It is the thirst behind ambition, the drive for fame, power, reputation, and legacy. It is the desire to become a better version of ourselves, not out of a healthy aspiration for growth, but out of a deep-seated fear that we, as we are now, are not enough. This craving fuels our obsession with social status, with climbing corporate ladders, with accumulating wealth not for what it can buy, but for what it says about who we are. It is the addiction to the process of becoming, which is a direct resistance to the simple reality of being. We are so busy trying to construct the me of the future that we are never present in the only reality we have, the me of right now. This thirst guarantees dissatisfaction because it is based on the false premise of a solid self that can be perfected and made permanent. It is a ghost trying to build a stone monument to itself. The third form is the dark twin of the second, vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence or annihilation. This is the thirst to get rid of something. It is the powerful aversion we feel toward unpleasant experiences. It is the desperate wish for a painful feeling to go away, for a difficult situation to end, for an annoying person to disappear from our lives. It is the energy of hatred, anger, fear, and denial. All our resistance, our saying no to what is a manifestation of vibhava tanha. We want to annihilate the unpleasant reality that confronts us. In its most extreme form, this can lead to suicidal ideation, the desire to annihilate the self to escape its pain. But in its everyday form, it is our addiction to numbing agents, alcohol, drugs, overeating, mindless entertainment, anything to avoid feeling what is actually present. This thirst, this craving for annihilation, is paradoxical. The more we fight a feeling, the more we resist a situation, the more energy we give it, the more it persists and the more power it has over us. These three thirsts for pleasure, for becoming, and for annihilation are the pathogens. They are the act of constantly drinking salt water to quench our thirst. The momentary relief is always followed by a more intense, more painful craving. This is the feedback loop that keeps us trapped in what Buddhists call samsara, the endless cycle of struggle and dissatisfaction. After delivering such a precise diagnosis and identifying such a powerful cause, a patient might feel a sense of despair. If this thirst is so deep and so powerful, am I doomed? This is where the physician delivers the most important news of all. This is the third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of dukkha, nirodha. This is the prognosis, and the prognosis is one of profound hope. The Buddha states unequivocally that there is an end to this suffering. This condition is curable. Nirodha means cessation, extinction, or ending. It refers to the complete cessation of that feverish thirst, tanha. If the thirst is the cause of the fire of suffering, then the extinguishing of that thirst is the end of the fire. This is not the annihilation of the person. It is not a retreat into a blank, empty void. It is the annihilation of the illusion that binds us, the extinguishing of the greed, hatred, and delusion that fuel our suffering. It is the supreme peace that comes from no longer being a slave to the compulsive need for things to be different than they are. It is the end of all resistance. It is the state the Buddha called nibbana or nirvana. It is an unshakable freedom, a peace that surpasses all understanding, because it is not dependent on any external conditions. It is the mind's natural, radiant state when it is no longer obscured by the clouds of craving. It is the ultimate good news. Freedom is possible. The quicksand does not have to be our final resting place. So, the diagnosis is dukkha, the cause is tanha, the prognosis is nirodha, the possibility of freedom. The final question to the physician is the most practical one of all. What is the prescription? What is the treatment plan I must follow to realize this cure for myself? This is the fourth noble truth, the truth of the path to the cessation of dukkha, magga. The Buddha did not just point to a destination. He provided a detailed, step-by-step map to get there. This map is the Noble Eightfold Path. This path is not a linear sequence of steps to be completed one after the other. It is a holistic set of 8 interwoven factors that, when cultivated together, bring the entirety of one's life into alignment with reality. They support and deepen each other, like the strands of a single, strong rope. To make it easier to understand, these 8 factors are often grouped into 3 categories of training. First is the training in wisdom, panna. This includes right view and right intention. Right view is seeing the world clearly, as it is, understanding the laws of anicca, anatta, dukkha, and the dynamic of cause and effect. It is the intellectual map. Right intention is then aligning our heart with this view, the intention of renunciation, of goodwill, and of harmlessness. Second is the training in ethical conduct, sila. This includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is about manifesting our wisdom in the world. It involves speaking truthfully and kindly, acting in ways that do not harm ourselves or others, and earning a living in a way that is honorable and beneficial. This ethical living calms the mind and removes the coarse agitations of guilt and remorse, creating a stable foundation for deeper work. Third is the training in mental discipline, samadhi. This includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the direct training of the mind, the inner work. It involves the joyful effort to cultivate wholesome states and release unwholesome ones, the practice of moment-to-moment awareness without judgment, and the development of a calm, focused, and unified mind capable of deep insight. This is the physician's complete prescription. The 4 noble truths are a call to action, a framework for liberation that is both complete and profoundly empowering. It places the cause and the cure for our suffering not in the hands of a god or in the whims of fate, but squarely within our own hearts and minds. The map has been laid out before us. The cause of our illness has been identified as the deep and pervasive fever of tanha. To begin the treatment, we must now turn our full attention to this cause. We must investigate this thirst, understand its texture, its triggers, and its seductive whispers in our own lives. We must now explore the very root of our clinging. We stand now with a map in our hands. The Four Noble Truths have provided a framework of profound clarity, a physician's chart for the human spirit. We have accepted the diagnosis of dukkha, the pervasive dissatisfaction that colors our lives. We have heard the hopeful prognosis, nirodha, the truth that a cure, a lasting peace, is possible. And we have been shown that the cause, the single pathogen at the root of our condition, is tanha. It is this deep, abiding thirst that we must now turn to examine. To simply name the cause is not enough. To truly begin the path to healing, we must become intimately familiar with the agent of our own disease. We must move from an intellectual definition to a felt, lived understanding of this craving in our own hearts and minds. We must place tanha under the microscope of our awareness and watch, with patient curiosity, how it moves, how it speaks, and how it perpetuates its own existence. The word tanha points to a feeling far more visceral and compelling than simple desire. It is a thirst. Think of the desperate, all-consuming nature of true physical thirst. It is not a mild preference. It is a commanding, biological imperative that hijacks your attention and drives your actions. This is the nature of the craving the Buddha spoke of. It is a compulsive, neurotic energy that arises from the mistaken belief that we are a separate, lacking self that needs something from the outside world to be whole. It is the friction of the ghost-like ego trying to grasp onto the flowing river of reality. As we saw, this thirst manifests in three primary ways, and by learning to recognize them in our daily lives, we begin to rob them of their unconscious power over us. First, and most conspicuously, there is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasure. This is the constant hum of desire for our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body to be fed with pleasant stimuli. Our modern world is a grand temple built in worship of this thirst. It is the engine of consumerism, the force that whispers that happiness is just one purchase away. It is the compulsion to unlock our phone, not because we need information, but because we crave the small, novel hit of a new image, a new message, a new piece of gossip. This is the thirst for the next episode, the next song, the next delicious meal, the next sexual encounter. We live in a state of restlessness, believing that if we can just arrange our external world perfectly, feeding ourselves an unbroken stream of pleasant experiences, our inner dissatisfaction will cease. But this is a fool's errand, for it runs headlong into the universal law of anicca. The pleasure of the finest meal lasts only as long as the taste is on our tongue. The thrill of the new car fades as it becomes familiar. The beautiful sunset gives way to darkness. Every pleasant experience contains the seed of its own passing, and so our pursuit is doomed to be a cycle of brief gratification, followed by the return of the underlying thirst, often now with a new layer of disappointment. The promised satisfaction is always just around the next corner, a horizon that recedes as we approach it. The second, deeper thirst is bhavatanha, the thirst for existence or becoming. If kamatanha is about what we want to have, bhavatanha is about who we want to be. This is the ego's addiction to its own narrative of progress and self-improvement. It is the deep-seated need to solidify our identity, to become more real, more important, more secure. This is the thirst that drives the workaholic, not for the money, but for the validation of being successful. It is the thirst behind the relentless curation of a personal brand on social media, the desperate attempt to present a flawless, enviable version of ourselves to the world. It is the spiritual seeker's subtle desire to become enlightened, as if enlightenment were an achievement the ego could possess. This thirst for becoming is a profound rejection of the present moment. It constantly tells us that who we are right now is not enough. We must become more knowledgeable, more fit, more mindful, more wealthy, more loved. It creates a future-oriented life of immense pressure, a life where we are always in rehearsal for a performance that never arrives. We are so invested in the story of who we are becoming that we completely miss the simple, quiet reality of who we are. The third thirst is the shadow of the second. It is vibhava tanha, the thirst for non-existence or annihilation. This is the energy of aversion, the powerful craving to get rid of an unpleasant experience. It is the voice that screams no in the face of reality. When a feeling of sadness arises, vibhavatanya is the immediate urge to distract ourselves, to push it down, to annihilate it from our awareness. When we are stuck in traffic, it is the rage and frustration that wants to annihilate the obstacle. When we encounter a person whose views we despise, it is the desire to annihilate their perspective, to prove them wrong, to make them disappear. And here we find the very heart of the central theme of our entire exploration. Resistance is a form of vibhava tanha. Every act of mental or emotional resistance, every judgment, every worry, every ounce of resentment is fueled by this thirst for an unwanted reality to cease to be. Just as we compulsively chase pleasure, we compulsively flee from pain. But the tragic irony is that our flight is what gives the pain its power. By fighting it, we engage with it, we feed it our energy, and we ensure its persistence. We try to annihilate our anxiety, and in doing so, we become anxious about our anxiety, adding a second layer to our suffering. To truly understand the self-defeating nature of tanha, we can use the parable of a man adrift on a raft in the middle of the ocean, dying of thirst. He is surrounded by water, endless water, yet he cannot drink it. In his delirium and desperation, he finally gives in. He cups his hands, scoops up the clear, cool-looking water, and drinks deeply. For a brief, blissful moment, there is relief. The agonizing dryness in his throat is soothed. He has satisfied his craving. But this relief is a cruel deception. The salt in the water immediately begins to draw more moisture out of his body. Within minutes, the initial thirst returns with a vengeance, more intense, more agonizing, more desperate than before. His very attempt to quench his thirst has made his condition catastrophically worse. This is a perfect metaphor for tanha. Our underlying dissatisfaction, our dukkha, is the deep, existential thirst. The salt water is the object of our craving, the fleeting pleasure, the ego-affirming achievement, the momentary distraction from pain. We indulge the craving, and for a moment, we feel relief. We get the like, we eat the cake, we win the argument, we successfully numb our sadness for an evening. But because these solutions do not address the root cause, and because they are all impermanent, the relief is short-lived. The underlying thirst soon returns, often stronger and more demanding, and we are driven to seek a bigger gulp of salt water. This is the cycle of addiction. This is the cycle of samsara. It is a self-perpetuating loop of suffering, powered entirely by the mistaken belief that the salt water of the world can quench the soul's deep thirst for peace. By investigating tanha in this way, we are not judging ourselves. We are simply observing a natural, impersonal process that operates within us due to ignorance. We see that the desire for pleasure, the desire to be somebody, and the desire to escape pain are not personal failings, but universal human tendencies. We see how they promise happiness but deliver only a deeper thirst. We have now moved from a theoretical understanding of the cause of our suffering to a practical, intimate one. We have the map from the Four Noble Truths. We have placed the pathogen, tanha, under our own microscope and seen how it functions. We are now fully prepared. We are standing at the trailhead, ready to take the first step of the prescribed treatment. The first step on this noble eightfold path, the foundation upon which all else is built, is to ensure we are seeing correctly. Before we can walk the path, we must be able to see it clearly. We must cultivate right view. We have arrived at the trailhead. The journey through the landscape of our own minds has led us here, to the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. We have the physician's diagnosis in hand, the truth of our own dissatisfaction, dukkha. We understand its origin, the feverish, compulsive thirst of tanha. We hold on to the hopeful prognosis that a cure, a lasting peace called nirodha, is possible. And now, we look at the prescription, the practical path to that cure. But before taking a single physical step, before engaging in any specific practice, we must first ensure we are oriented correctly. To be lost in a forest with a map is useless if you are holding the map upside down. The first and most crucial element of this path is about learning to see the world and ourselves with startling clarity. It is about correcting our vision. This foundational step is called samaditthi, or right view. The Eightfold Path is not a rigid staircase of sequential steps, where you must perfect one before moving to the next. It is more like a majestic braid, where 8 distinct strands are woven together to create a single, strong, and beautiful whole. Each strand supports and strengthens all the others. Or think of it as a wheel with 8 spokes, all converging on a central hub of liberation. Without any one of them, the wheel is weakened and cannot roll smoothly. The path is a holistic guide for living, one that integrates our understanding, our ethics, and our mental training into a seamless way of being. Yet, in this intricate design, right view is given pride of place. It is the tip of the spear, the guiding light, the rudder that steers the entire vessel of our spiritual life. So, what is this right view? It is, quite simply, seeing things as they truly are. It is the clear, cognitive understanding of the fundamental laws of existence that we have been so carefully exploring. Right view is the intellectual acceptance, which through practice becomes a deep, unshakable conviction of 4 key insights. First, it is the understanding of the 4 noble truths themselves, the framework of dukkha, its cause, its cessation, and the path. It is knowing the medical chart. Second, it is the deep appreciation of anicca, the impermanent, flowing nature of all phenomena. Third, it is the penetrating insight into anatta, the truth that there is no fixed, separate, unchanging self to be found within our experience. And fourth, it is the understanding of kamma, or karma. This is not the popular notion of a cosmic judge dispensing rewards and punishments. Karma is the simple, impersonal law of cause and effect as it relates to our volitional actions. It is the understanding that our intentions matter profoundly. Actions born from intentions of greed, hatred, and delusion, tanha, will inevitably lead to suffering for ourselves and others. Actions born from intentions of generosity, kindness, and wisdom will inevitably lead to peace and happiness. It is absolutely essential to understand what right view is not. It is not blind faith. It is not the unquestioning acceptance of a religious dogma. The Buddha was not interested in creating followers who simply believed what he said. He was interested in creating explorers who were willing to test his map against the territory of their own lives. Right view begins as a working hypothesis. It is like being given a blueprint for a house you have never seen. You study the blueprint, you see that it is logical and coherent, and you provisionally accept it as a guide. Then, as you begin to follow the instructions and build the houses, you begin to practice the other elements of the path. You see for yourself that the blueprint was accurate. The walls stand firm, the roof does not leak. Your intellectual belief is transformed into an experiential conviction. Right view is the ongoing process of replacing our distorted, ego-driven views with a perspective that aligns with reality. Without this clear view as its foundation, the rest of the path becomes aimless and even potentially harmful. Imagine you are trying to drive from one city to another. The other 7 path factors are like the components of your car. Right effort is the engine, providing the power. Right mindfulness is the clear windshield, allowing you to see the road. Right concentration is the steady hand on the steering wheel. Right action and right speech are the rules of the road that keep you safe. But right view is the map and the destination. Without the map, you can have a powerful engine and a steady hand, but you will only drive with great efficiency in the wrong direction. You might end up further from your goal than when you started. You can be incredibly mindful of your anger, but if your view is that the world is to blame for your problems, your mindfulness will only serve to sharpen your sense of victimhood. You can be deeply concentrated, but if your view is that the goal is to acquire psychic powers, your concentration will only inflate your ego. Right view provides the why for everything else we do on the path. Why do we practice letting go? Because of anicca and anatta. Why do we cultivate compassion? Because we have a view of kamma and understand that our own happiness is inseparable from the happiness of others. Right view is the wisdom that gives purpose and direction to all our efforts. There is a famous parable that perfectly illustrates the difference between wrong view and right view. A king once brought a magnificent elephant into his courtyard and summoned a group of men who had been born blind. He asked them to each approach the elephant, touch it, and describe what it is. The first man reached out and touched the elephant's thick, sturdy leg. "I know what an elephant is," he declared. "It is a living pillar." The second man got a hold of the tail. "No, you are mistaken," he said. "An elephant is like a rope with a frayed end." The third man happened to touch the long, flexible trunk. "You are both fools," he proclaimed. An elephant is clearly a great, thick snake. A fourth man touched the wide, flat ear and said it was like a fan. Another touched the sharp tusk and said it was a spear. Soon, they were all embroiled in a violent argument, each man absolutely convinced that his own partial, limited experience represented the whole and complete truth. Each man's view was, in its own way, correct based on his data, but because he mistook his partial truth for the entire reality, it became a wrong view. We are all, in our unenlightened state, like these blind men. We grasp onto one small part of real at your current emotion, our cherished political opinion, our personal history of being wronged, and we declare it to be the whole truth of the situation. We mistake our subjective experience for objective reality. Our ego's perspective is always a partial view. Right view is the perspective of the one who is not blind. It is the perspective of the king, or the Buddha, who can see the entire elephant. It is the wisdom that understands how the leg, the tail, the trunk, and the ear are all different, valid parts of a larger, integrated whole. It does not deny the partial truths, but it places them in their proper context. It is the unifying vision that ends the argument. To cultivate right view is to develop the humility to admit that our current perspective is limited and to orient ourselves toward a more complete and holistic understanding of reality. We now stand at the trailhead, holding this new map. We have corrected our vision, and for the first time, we are seeing the landscape of our lives not through the distorted lens of the ego's fears and desires, but with the clarity of right view. We understand the terrain of dukkha, we see the cause and the fever of tanha, and we see the destination of nirodha shining on a distant peak. We are facing the right direction. When the head is clear, the next logical step is to align the heart. Our way of seeing must now inform our way of thinking. The clear vision we have cultivated must now be translated into the energy and motivation we bring to the path. Having established what to see, we now must learn how to intend. This leads us directly to the second strand of the Great Braid, the cultivation of right intention. We are standing at the beginning of the path, our vision corrected. The lens of right view has allowed us to see the landscape of reality with a newfound clarity. We understand the nature of our dissatisfaction, its cause in our own thirst, and the possibility of a lasting peace. We are holding the architect's blueprint, but a blueprint alone does not create a building. Now, we must make a fundamental choice. What kind of structure do we intend to build with our lives? Will it be a prison of resentment and craving, a fortress to defend a frightened ego, or will it be a sanctuary of wisdom and compassion, open to the world? This choice, made not once but in every moment, is the essence of the second step on the path, Samma Sankappa, or right intention. If right view is the work of the head, right intention is the work of the heart. It is the quality of our motivation, the texture of our inner world. It is the crucial step of aligning our thoughts and aspirations with the clear vision we have cultivated. It's not enough to see that the world is impermanent and selfless. We must actively choose to think and act in ways that are in harmony with that reality. Right intention is about consciously purifying our minds, replacing the fuel of our suffering with the fuel of our liberation. The thoughts that drive our suffering, what could be called wrong intention, are said to spring from three poisons, or three unwholesome roots. The first is the intention of greed and lust, born from the thirst for sense pleasure, kama tanha. The second is the intention of ill will, anger, and hatred, born from the thirst for annihilation, vibhava tanha. The third is the intention of cruelty and violence, born from the delusion that we are separate and in conflict with others. These three, greed, hatred, and delusion, are the toxic fuel that powers the engine of dukkha. Right intention is the deliberate practice of replacing this toxic fuel with three wholesome, liberating intentions. The first of these is the intention of renunciation, or nekkhamma. To the Western ear, renunciation can sound severe and joyless, conjuring images of self-denial and a grim turning away from the world. But in this context, its meaning is one of profound freedom and relief. It is not about physically giving up your home or possessions, but about the inner act of renouncing your clinging to them. It is the intention to let go. It is the conscious choice to loosen the ego's tight-fisted grip on experiences, outcomes, opinions, and identities. It is seeing the endless cycle of chasing pleasure and realizing its futility and intentionally choosing contentment instead. Renunciation is not giving something up. It is gaining freedom from the exhausting tyranny of your own cravings. It is the moment the man adrift at sea, understanding its poison, renounces the salt water. He doesn't lose the water, he gains a chance at survival. Cultivating the intention of renunciation means noticing the pull of consumerism and choosing simplicity. It means noticing the desire for praise and choosing the quiet integrity of your own work. It is a gentle, internal turning away from complexity and toward peace. The second wholesome intention is the intention of goodwill, or avyapada. This is the direct and powerful antidote to the poison of ill will, anger, and hatred. It is the conscious cultivation of a warm, unconditional friendliness toward all beings, without exception. This begins with ourselves. It is the sincere wish, arising from the heart, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. From there, this benevolent intention is extended outwards, to our loved ones, to our friends, to neutral people we pass on the street, and, most challengingly, to those we find difficult or have wronged us. The intention of goodwill does not mean we must approve of everyone's actions. It means we recognize that, like us, they are beings who wish to be happy and to avoid suffering. When someone acts out of anger or greed, the intention of goodwill allows us to see their action not as a personal assault, but as a symptom of their own dukkha. This view softens our heart and protects our own peace. To practice this is to consciously replace the thought, I can't stand that person, with the intention, may they be free from the anger that is causing them to act this way. May they find peace. It is a radical act of self-care, as it dissolves the corrosive poison of resentment within our own mind. The third wholesome intention flows naturally from the second. It is the intention of harmlessness, or avihimsa. This is the intention of compassion, or karuna. While goodwill is the wish for others to be happy, harmlessness is the active intention to not cause suffering, physically, verbally, or mentally. It is the resolve to move through the world with a gentle footprint. This, too, must begin with ourselves. The intention of harmlessness means we stop being cruel to ourselves. We cease the endless litany of the inner critic, the harsh self-judgment that tells us we are not good enough. We begin to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer to a beloved friend who is struggling. When this compassion is established for ourselves, it naturally radiates outward. It is rooted in the wisdom of right view. When we truly see that all beings are trapped in the same web of anicca, anatta, and dukkha, the desire to cause harm falls away. How can you hate someone when you see their anger is simply a manifestation of their own deep suffering? How can you hold on to contempt when you see their arrogance is a mask for their own insecurity? The intention of harmlessness is the recognition of our shared predicament, the understanding that we are all in this together. There is a timeless story, often attributed to the Cherokee people, that beautifully illustrates the practice of right intention. An elder is teaching his grandchild about life. He says, "A fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One wolf is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, and ego." He continues, "The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandchild thinks about this for a minute and then asks his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old man simply replies, "The one you feed." Right intention is the conscious practice of choosing which wolf to feed, moment by moment. It is the recognition that our thoughts are not random, inevitable events. They are habits, and we can cultivate new ones. We can choose to feed the wolf of goodwill instead of the wolf of resentment. We can choose to feed the wolf of renunciation instead of the wolf of craving. We can choose to feed the wolf of harmlessness instead of the wolf of judgment. The practice begins with awareness. Throughout the day, we can pause and ask ourselves, what is my intention right now? What is the motivation behind my speech or my next action? Is it coming from a place of clarity and kindness, or from a place of fear, craving, and ego. This is not about achieving perfection, but about gently and repeatedly turning the mind toward the wholesome, just as we would train a puppy. Each time we consciously choose a wholesome intention, we are feeding the good wolf. We are weakening the unwholesome habits and strengthening the habits that lead to peace. We have now established the two foundational elements of the path, the wisdom section. With right view, we have cleared our vision and learned to read the map of reality. With right intention, we have purified our hearts and set our inner compass in the direction of freedom. Our mind is clear and our motivation is pure. The inner world is being brought into harmony. The next logical step in our journey is to see how this inner alignment translates into our engagement with the outer world. How does a person with a clear head and a kind heart speak? How do they act? How do they conduct their life? The path now moves from the realm of inner cultivation to outer expression. This brings us to the next three strands of the braid, the great section on ethical conduct, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. The inner world is beginning to quiet. With right view as our guide, we have started to see the world through a lens of clarity, and with right intention as our compass, we have begun to align our hearts with the energy of kindness, letting go, and compassion. We are feeding the wolf of peace. But this inner transformation cannot remain a private, hidden project. A seed planted in fertile soil must eventually break through the ground and reach for the sun. The purity of our inner world must now find its expression in our outer world. The clear mind and the kind heart must manifest as skillful speech and compassionate action. This bridge between our internal state and our external behavior is the next great phase of the path. It is the training in sila, or ethical conduct. We must approach this training not as a list of rigid commandments handed down from on high, but as a profound act of psychological wisdom. These are not rules designed to please a judging God, but guidelines designed to protect our own peace of mind and the well-being of others. The practice of sila has two primary functions. First, it acts as a shield, protecting other beings from being harmed by our unskillful actions. Second, and just as importantly, it acts as a balm for our own minds. When we live a life of integrity, we have nothing to hide and nothing to regret. This frees our minds from the coarse agitations of guilt, remorse, and fear. A mind that is not agitated is a mind that can become calm. A mind that is calm is a mind that can become concentrated. And a mind that is concentrated is a mind that can see reality clearly and attain liberation. Ethical conduct, therefore, is not an optional add-on to a spiritual practice. It is the indispensable foundation upon which the entire structure of meditation and wisdom is built. It is the act of allowing the mud to settle so the water of the mind can become clear. This training is comprised of three interwoven strands: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Let us begin with right speech, or samavaka, for our words are our most frequent and often most careless form of action. We create worlds with our words. We can create worlds of safety, trust, and connection, or we can create worlds of fear, division, and pain. Right speech is the art of creating worlds that heal. It involves the conscious refraining from four types of harmful speech. First, we train ourselves to abstain from false speech. This means more than just avoiding outright lies. It includes the subtle deceptions, the white lies told for social convenience, the exaggerations designed to make ourselves look better, the broken promises, and the misleading silences that allow others to believe a falsehood. To live truthfully is to live in simplicity. There are no complex webs of deceit to maintain, no fear of being discovered. Your inner and outer worlds align, and the mind becomes settled and clear. Second, we abstain from divisive speech. This is the poison of gossip, slander, and words that set one person against another. It is the act of carrying tales, of speaking ill of someone behind their back, of using information to create disharmony. This kind of speech is often fueled by the ego's desire to feel important, to be in the know, or to elevate itself by diminishing others. The practice of right speech is to speak in ways that encourage harmony and understanding. It is to praise the good qualities of others, to bring people together, and when that is not possible, to cultivate a noble silence. Third, we abstain from harsh speech. This is the weaponization of language. It is yelling, insulting, belittling, and using sarcasm as a blade. Harsh speech is the direct verbal expression of anger and ill will, the sound of vibhavatana wanting to annihilate another's point of view or sense of self. It pollutes the atmosphere, wounds the heart of the receiver, and deeply agitates the mind of the speaker. The antidote is to consciously cultivate speech that is gentle, kind, considerate, and helpful. Even when disagreeing, it is to remember that behind every opinion we dislike is a person who, like us, is suffering. Fourth, we abstain from idle chatter. This is speech that is empty, aimless, and purposeless. It is the endless gossip about celebrities, the obsessive analysis of sports, the chronic complaining that seeks no solution. This kind of talk is not seen as a sin, but as a leak of precious mental energy. It scatters the mind, keeping it locked on the surface of life, preventing it from gathering the stillness needed for deeper contemplation. The practice is to value silence, to speak with purpose, and to ask ourselves, before we speak, is what I am about to say true, kind, and beneficial? Is this the right time to say it? From our words, we turn to our deeds. Right action, or samakamanta, is the application of this same principle of harmlessness to our physical behaviors. Traditionally, this is outlined as abstaining from three main actions. First, abstaining from taking life. At its most basic, this means not killing human beings or animals. On a deeper level, it is the cultivation of a profound reverence for all of life, an attitude of gentleness and non-violence in all our actions. Second, we abstain from taking what is not given. This is the precept against stealing. This extends beyond simple theft to include any form of dishonesty in our dealings, cheating on our taxes, infringing on copyrights, taking office supplies, or failing to pay our debts. It is about respecting the property and efforts of others and cultivating a mind of honesty and generosity. When we do not steal, we have no fear of being caught. Our mind is at ease. Third, we abstain from sexual misconduct. In a modern context, this is best understood as the intention to not cause harm to ourselves or others through our sexuality. It is about bringing consciousness, respect, and kindness into our intimate lives. It means avoiding any form of exploitation, coercion, or infidelity that would cause pain to our partner or to others. It is the practice of seeing our sexuality not as a source of mere gratification, kamatana, but as a potential expression of genuine connection, care, and mutual respect. The third strand of our ethical training is right livelihood, or samma ajiva. This is the recognition that we must bring this same ethical awareness into the sphere where we spend most of our waking hours, our work. It is the commitment to earning a living in a way that is honorable and does not cause harm. The ancient texts listed specific trades to be avoided, such as dealing in weapons, poisons, intoxicants, or human beings. We can modernize this principle by asking ourselves deeply honest questions about our work. Does my livelihood depend on deception? Does it exploit people or the planet? Does it promote greed, violence, or addiction? This can be an incredibly challenging practice in our complex global economy, and the goal is not a rigid purity, but a conscious, intentional effort. It is about choosing, to the best of our ability, work that aligns with our values, and to act as ethically as possible within the job we have. It is to see our work not just as a means to a paycheck, but as a part of our spiritual path, an opportunity to contribute to the world rather than cause it harm. Imagine throwing a small stone into a perfectly still pond, a single, small action. But from that point of impact, ripples spread out in every direction, reaching the furthest shores, subtly affecting the entire body of water. Our actions and words are like this stone. A single harsh word does not just exist in the moment it is spoken. The ripples of that action agitate our own mind with anger. They strike the ear of the other person, agitating their mind with hurt or defensiveness. They may then carry that agitation into their next interaction, speaking harshly to someone else. The negative energy spreads. A single act of kindness works in precisely the same way. Its ripples spread peace, trust, and warmth far beyond the initial act. Sila is the conscious practice of throwing stones of kindness, truth, and harmlessness into the pond of the world. By weaving these three strands, right speech, right action, and right livelihood into the fabric of our lives, we create a life of profound integrity and beauty. We build a foundation of non-remorse, a mind that is not plagued by guilt, not agitated by the fear of being discovered, not disturbed by conflict, is a mind that is naturally peaceful, stable, and at ease. We have calmed the waters. We have prepared the ground. This mind, serene and unburdened, is now the perfect laboratory for the deeper, more focused work of directly training our awareness. We are now ready to build the structure. This brings us to the very heart of the meditative path, the next great phase of training in mental discipline: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We have laid the foundation for a life of peace. With the clarity of right view and the warmth of right intention, our inner world is oriented toward freedom. With the integrity of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, we have smoothed the ground of our outer world, creating a life of non-remorse and simplicity. The mind is no longer agitated by guilt or conflict. The waters have settled. Now, we arrive at the very heart of the path, the direct training of the mind itself. This is the great section on mental discipline, or samadhi, and it begins with the critical element that will power our entire meditative journey: right effort. To a mind conditioned by the modern world, the word effort conjures images of struggle, strain, and stress. We are taught to hustle, to live by the creed of no pain, no gain. We imagine spiritual effort as a kind of grim, white-knuckled battle against our own weaknesses, a forceful suppression of our unwanted thoughts and feelings. This view, however, is the very essence of the resistance that keeps us stuck in the quicksand. The Buddhist understanding of right effort, or samavayama, is radically different. It is not the brute force of a soldier storming a fortress, but the wise, patient, and discerning energy of a master gardener tending to a precious garden, the garden of the mind. It is an effort that is balanced, sustainable, and, in time, becomes a source of profound joy. Before the gardener can work, they must learn to distinguish between the weeds and the flowers. In the context of the mind, we call these the unwholesome and wholesome states. It is crucial to understand these terms not in a moralistic, judgmental way, but in a pragmatic, psychological one. Unwholesome states, or akusala, are simply states of mind rooted in the three poisons we have already identified: greed, hatred, and delusion. They are called unwholesome or unskillful because, like weeds, they choke the life out of the garden, leading directly to our own suffering and the suffering of others. They are states like anger, jealousy, resentment, anxiety, fear, restlessness, doubt, and mental dullness. They are characterized by a feeling of contraction, tightness, and agitation. Wholesome states, or kusala, are the flowers. They are states of mind rooted in the antidotes to the poisons: non-greed, generosity, renunciation, non-hatred, loving, kindness, compassion, and non-delusion, wisdom, clarity. They are skillful because they naturally lead to peace, happiness, and freedom for ourselves and others. They are states like patience, joy, tranquility, confidence, equanimity, and mindfulness. They are characterized by a feeling of expansion, softness, and ease. Right effort is the gardener's art of skillfully encouraging the flowers to bloom while gently removing the weeds. This art is practiced in four distinct, yet related, ways. They are known as the four great efforts. The first is the effort to prevent. This is the gardener's wisdom of inspecting the soil and removing any weed seeds before they have a chance to sprout. This is a proactive, intelligent practice. It involves guarding the sense dorsal, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and recognizing the triggers that tend to give rise to unwholesome states. It is not about hiding from the world, but about navigating it with wisdom. For example, if you know from experience that endlessly scrolling through social media feeds tends to plant the seeds of envy and self-criticism in your mind, the effort to prevent means consciously choosing to limit your exposure. If you know that engaging in political arguments with a certain family member always results in a harvest of anger and resentment, the effort to prevent means skillfully steering conversations towards safer topics. This is not suppression, it is prudence. It is the wisdom of seeing a spark near a pile of dry leaves and choosing to move the leaves, rather than waiting to fight a raging fire. But no matter how vigilant the gardener, some weeds will inevitably sprout. Life will present us with challenges, and unwholesome states will arise. This brings us to the second practice, the effort to abandon. This is the skill of dealing with a weed once it has broken through the soil. The untrained response is often one of two extremes. Either we indulge the weed, letting the anger or jealousy grow wild until it takes over the whole garden, or we try to violently rip it out, an act of self-judgment and suppression. I'm a bad person for feeling this. I have to get rid of it. This violent approach is just more resistance, more vibhavatana, and it often strengthens the weed's roots. The effort to abandon is far more skillful. It can take several forms. The first is to simply observe the unwholesome state with mindful awareness. We see the anger arise, and we note, anger is here. We watch it as a neutral scientist would watch a weather pattern, without feeding it with stories or judgments. When we do not feed the weed with our attention and energy, it often withers and dies on its own. Another method is to skillfully replace the unwholesome with the wholesome. When a thought of irritation towards someone arises, we can intentionally bring to mind one of their good qualities or a time they were kind to us. We gently replace the weed with a flower. A third method is to investigate the weed with curiosity. What does this anxiety actually feel like in my body? A tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach. What thought is fueling it? This changes our relationship to the emotion. It is no longer an enemy to be destroyed, but an object of meditation, a source of insight. The third practice is where the true joy of the path begins to blossom. It is the effort to arouse or to cultivate. This is the gardener's delightful task of actively planting the seeds of beautiful flowers where none existed before. This is the recognition that we do not have to passively wait for happiness to find us. We can actively create the conditions for it to arise. It is the practice of intentionally turning the mind toward the wholesome. You can arouse joy by deliberately recollecting your own past acts of generosity. You can arouse gratitude by taking a moment to list 5 things in your life you are thankful for, no matter how small. You can arouse loving kindness by sitting for a few minutes and sincerely wishing yourself and others well, using a practice like metta meditation. You can arouse inspiration by reading the words of wise teachers or spending time in nature. This is an act of creative cultivation, of consciously populating the garden of your mind with beauty, color, and fragrance. It is a profound shift from a reactive life to a proactive one. Finally, once the flowers of wholesome states have begun to grow, we engage in the fourth practice, the effort to maintain and perfect. When a moment of genuine peace, calm, or joy arises in your meditation or your daily life, the untrained mind often overlooks it or quickly moves on to the next thing. This fourth effort encourages us to do the opposite. It is the skill of nurturing the wholesome states that are already present. When you feel a moment of peace, the practice is to savor it. Stay with it. Notice what it feels like. Appreciate it. Ask yourself, what conditions allowed this peace to arise? By giving these wholesome states our gentle, appreciative attention, we strengthen them. We water the seedlings. We create the neural pathways that make it easier for these states to become our new default. We are not just creating fleeting positive experiences. We are gradually, patiently, re-landscaping the entire terrain of our mind, transforming it from a neglected, weed-choked lot into a flourishing sanctuary of peace. The spirit of all 4 of these efforts is one of balance. This is beautifully illustrated in the story of Sona, a monk who had been a gifted lute player before his ordination. Sona was fiercely determined to attain enlightenment and practiced walking meditation with such aggressive, relentless effort that his feet became cracked and bloody. He was exhausted, discouraged, and on the verge of giving up, thinking the path was too difficult. The Buddha, perceiving his state of mind, visited him and asked, "Sona, as a musician, you understand the art of tuning the lute. Tell me, what happens if you tighten the strings too much?" Sona replied, "Venerable sir, if the strings are too tight, they will snap and the lute will be useless." The Buddha then asked, "And what happens if you leave the strings too loose?" Sona answered, "If they are too loose, they will not produce any sound when played." The Buddha then delivered the crucial teaching, and what is required to create beautiful, harmonious music. Sona replied, "The strings must be tuned just right, master. Not too tight and not too loose." The Buddha smiled. "So it is, Sona, with the energy you apply to your spiritual practice. If your effort is too strained and tense, it will lead to restlessness and anxiety. If your effort is too slack and lazy, it will lead to dullness and complacency. You must tune your effort like the strings of your lute, finding that middle path of balanced, sustainable, and harmonious energy. This is the essence of right effort. It is not a violent struggle but a skillful tuning. It is the wise, compassionate application of energy, knowing when to be firm and when to be gentle, when to act and when to allow. It is the joyful work of the gardener, who finds deep satisfaction in the patient process of cultivation. This intelligent, balanced energy is not an end in itself. It is the fuel for our journey. And what precisely does it fuel? Its primary purpose is to support the steady, unwavering flame of our awareness. This wise effort is the power source for the next, and perhaps most well-known, factor on the path. The gardener has learned the art of skillful work. Now, he must learn the art of simply watching the garden. Right effort provides the perfect, harmonious energy needed to cultivate right mindfulness. The garden of the mind has been prepared. We have tilled the soil with the wisdom of right view and right intention. We have built a fence of ethical conduct to protect it from the harshest winds. And we have learned the art of the gardener's work, the balanced and joyful energy of right effort. Now, with our tools in hand and our energy tuned, we turn to the central practice itself, the very heart of mental cultivation. We are ready to learn the art of simply being present. This is the seventh and perhaps most widely recognized step of the path, a concept that has permeated Western culture, yet whose profound depth is often missed. This is the practice of samasati, or right mindfulness. Mindfulness, in its essence, is radically simple. It is the capacity to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. It is a bare, direct, and intimate awareness of your own experience as it unfolds, breath by breath. This simple act of non-judgmental observation is the direct and complete opposite of the resistance that has caused us so much suffering. Remember the quicksand. Resistance was the frantic, panicked struggle, the storytelling, the fighting against what is. Mindfulness is the act of relaxing, of ceasing the struggle, and simply noticing, this is the feeling of sinking. This is the sensation of pressure. This is the feeling of fear. Resistance requires a narrative, a judgment, a second arrow. Mindfulness short-circuits this entire process. It is the practice of meeting the first arrow with a calm, open, and accepting presence, and in doing so, choosing not to fire the second. Our ordinary state of mind is often called monkey mind. Like a restless monkey in a tree, it swings wildly from one branch to another, never staying still. It swings back into the past, replaying regrets and old conversations. It swings forward into the future, rehearsing anxieties and spinning out catastrophic fantasies. It is lost in a dream world of thought, almost completely disconnected from the reality of the present moment. Right mindfulness is the gentle training of this monkey mind. It is not about caging the monkey, but about patiently and kindly teaching it to sit still for a while, to rest in the here and now. To do this, we need an anchor. We need a home base to which we can return again and again when the mind inevitably wanders. The Buddha offered us the most perfect, portable, and profound anchor imaginable: our own breath. The practice of mindfulness of breath, or anapanasati, is the foundation of meditative training. The breath is the ideal object of attention for several reasons. It is always with us, from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death. It requires no special equipment and can be practiced anywhere. It is a neutral process, generally free from the heavy emotional and narrative baggage that our thoughts carry. And most importantly, the breath is always happening in the present moment. You cannot take a breath that is in the past, nor can you take one in the future. To be aware of your breathing is, by definition, to be present. Let us explore how to begin this practice. Find a posture that is both comfortable and alert. You can sit on a cushion on the floor, or you can sit upright in a chair with your feet flat on the ground. The key is to keep your back relatively straight, to allow for alertness, but without being rigid or tense. Allow your hands to rest comfortably in your lap or on your knees. Gently close your eyes, or if you prefer, leave them slightly open with a soft, unfocused gaze toward the floor. Now, bring your awareness to the simple, physical sensation of your own breathing. Do not try to change it or control it in any way. Simply observe the natural rhythm of the body breathing itself. You might choose to rest your attention at the tip of your nose, noticing the subtle sensation of the air entering and leaving your nostrils, the coolness of the in-breath, the warmth of the out-breath. Or, you might prefer to rest your attention on your abdomen, feeling the gentle rise on the inhalation and the gentle fall on the exhalation. Choose one spot and let your attention rest there, as lightly as a butterfly resting on a flower. Now comes the most important instruction of all. Sooner or later, your mind will wander. This is not a mistake. It is not a sign of failure. It is simply what minds do. It will wander into a thought, a memory, a sound, a plan. The moment of mindfulness, the true practice in the practice, is the moment you realize you have wandered. In that moment, there is no need for criticism or frustration. Do not judge yourself for thinking. Simply note, gently, thinking, or wandering, and then, with infinite kindness, gently and patiently, escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath. This process will repeat itself hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. Every single return is a victory. Every gentle escorting of your attention back to the breath is like a bicep curl for the muscle of mindfulness. You are not trying to achieve a perfectly empty mind. You are training in the art of returning, of beginning again, with kindness. A beautiful way to understand the spirit of mindfulness is the metaphor of the sky and the clouds. Your true nature, your underlying awareness, is like a vast, open, boundless blue sky. It is inherently peaceful, spacious, and clear. Your thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like the clouds that drift through this sky. Some clouds are white, light, and puffy thoughts of joy, feelings of peace. Other clouds are dark and heavy, full of lightning and thunder thoughts of anger, feelings of fear, physical pain. Our habitual tendency is to forget that we are the sky, and to believe that we are the clouds. When a dark storm cloud appears, we say, "I am angry," and we get lost in the turbulence. Mindfulness is the practice of remembering that you are the sky. The sky does not resist the clouds. It does not cling to the beautiful ones, or try to push away the stormy ones. It allows all of them to arise, to be present for a time, and to pass away, all within its vast, accepting embrace. The clouds cannot stain or harm the sky. They are simply temporary weather patterns. When you can rest as the sky-like awareness, your thoughts and feelings lose their power to overwhelm you. You can watch the storm of your own anger with a spacious calm, knowing that you are the space in which the storm is happening, not the storm itself. While the breath is our primary anchor, this sky-like awareness can be extended to every aspect of our lives. This is known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We practice mindfulness of the body, feeling the sensations of walking, the pressure of sitting, the warmth of a cup of tea in our hands. This grounds us in the present reality of our physical experience. We practice mindfulness of feelings, watching the constant arising and passing of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensations without being swept away by them. We practice mindfulness of the mind itself, noticing the quality of our mental status, it tired, focused, scattered, joyful, as impersonally as we would note the weather. And finally, we can practice mindfulness of the contents of the mind, seeing our thoughts not as absolute truths, but simply as mental events, observing them through the clarifying lens of the teachings we have learned. When we apply the balanced, harmonious energy of right effort to this continuous practice of right mindfulness, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind, which was once a wild, untamed monkey, gradually becomes more settled. The frantic swinging between past and future begins to slow down. The mind develops a new stability. It gains the ability to stay with an object of attention for longer and longer periods, without being pulled away by distraction. This emerging quality of a calm, focused, unified mind is a natural fruit of the practice. It is the 8th and final factor of the path, a state of deep tranquility and one-pointedness. Having learned to watch the gardener now finds that the garden itself has become still. This is the cultivation of right concentration. We have walked the path of the gardener, With the balanced energy of right effort, we learned how to skillfully tend to the mind. And with the gentle, unwavering gaze of right mindfulness, we learned to watch the garden of our experience without judgment. We learned to be the sky, not the clouds. As we continue to apply this patient, kind awareness, a natural and beautiful process begins to unfold. The restless energy of the mind, once scattered in 1,000 directions by worries, fantasies, and distractions, begins to gather itself. The wild, turbulent river begins to slow, to deepen, and to flow smoothly in a single, powerful channel. The flickering candle flame in the drafty room finds stillness. This emerging state of a calm, unified, and collected mind is the eighth and final factor of the path. It is the culmination of our mental training. It is the fruit that grows from the flower of mindfulness. This is Samma Samadhi, or right concentration. Samadhi is the ability of the mind to rest upon a single object of attention, fully and without distraction, for a sustained period of time. It is the pinnacle of mental stability and unity. This is not something that can be forced through sheer, aggressive willpower. A mind that is forced into submission will only rebel. Instead, Samadhi arises as the natural and effortless result of the preceding path factors working in harmony. Right view and right intention provide the clear and compassionate direction. Right speech, action, and livelihood create a life free from the agitation of remorse. Right effort provides the steady, balanced energy, like a constant, gentle pressure. Right mindfulness provides the continuous, moment-to-moment awareness that keeps us on track. When all these conditions are present, the mind, of its own accord, settles into a state of profound stillness and focus. It is like a wild horse that, through gentle and patient training, finally learns to stand calmly, strong and poised, ready for a command. It is vital to distinguish right concentration from the ordinary, everyday concentration we all experience. A person can be deeply concentrated while playing a complex piece of music. A surgeon can be focused during a delicate operation, and a child can be completely engrossed while playing a video game. This is worldly concentration. While powerful, it often lacks the ethical and wisdom components that make concentration right in the Buddhist sense. Worldly concentration can be used for unskillful ends, and it is often passive. We are grabbed by the interesting object. Right concentration, Samma Samadhi, is different in three crucial ways. First, it is cultivated intentionally as part of a path to liberation, not just for worldly success or entertainment. Second, it is always paired with mindfulness. The mind is not just absorbed, it is absorbed and aware, maintaining a subtle, non-judgmental knowing of what is happening. Third, it is guided by right view and right intention. Its ultimate purpose is not just to feel good or to shut out the world, but to create a mental instrument powerful enough to see reality with absolute clarity and thereby uproot the causes of suffering. A mind that has cultivated samadhi is a mind transformed. An unconcentrated mind is weak, fragmented, and vulnerable. It is like a leaky bucket, unable to hold any wisdom. It is easily swayed by the winds of public opinion, easily hijacked by a passing fear or a surge of anger. It is a slave to its own habitual reactions. A concentrated mind, on the other hand, is a mind of immense power and stability. Think of the difference between the diffuse light of a normal light bulb and the focused light of a laser. Both may use the same amount of energy, but the scattered light of the bulb weakly illuminates a room, while the focused beam of the laser can cut through steel. The concentrated mind is like a laser. It has the power to penetrate the surface of reality and see the subtle, underlying processes of anicca and anatta that are normally hidden from our agitated view. When difficult situations arise, a concentrated mind is not easily knocked off balance. It remains centered and calm, like the deep ocean which is unmoved by the churning waves on its surface. Furthermore, the practice of concentration is a source of profound, non-sensual joy. As the mind withdraws its energy from the constant chatter of thinking and the relentless demands of the senses, it discovers an inner wellspring of peace and bliss. This is not the agitated, fleeting pleasure we get from satisfying a craving, kamatanya. It is a deep, nourishing, and tranquil happiness, known in Pali as piti, rapture or joy, and sukha, bliss or happiness. These states arise naturally as the mind unifies. This inner joy is a crucial element of the path. because it provides a far superior form of pleasure to the salt water of worldly desires. When the mind can drink from this clean, cool well of meditative bliss, it loses its taste for the addictive, unsatisfying pleasures of the senses. This makes the intention of renunciation, of letting go, far easier. It is not a matter of depriving yourself, but of choosing a richer, more sustainable source of well-being. The formal stages of this deepening concentration are described in the teachings on the jhanas, or meditative absorptions, states of profound tranquility and unified consciousness. The function of samadhi is perfectly captured in the simple parable of the muddy water. Imagine you are holding a glass of water that is completely filled with mud, silt, and sediment. It has been shaken and stirred, and the water is so murky and opaque that you cannot see through it at all. This is a perfect image of our ordinary, unconcentrated mind churned up by worries, desires, resentments, and distractions. The mud is our mental defilements, the hindrances that cloud our vision. Our usual strategy is to try and fix the water by doing something to it. We try to force the mud out. We stir it more vigorously, hoping it will clear up. We curse the mud for being there. All of this, of course, only makes the water even murkier. This is our life of resistance, our constant, futile struggle. The practice of right concentration is the wisdom to do nothing at all. It is the simple act of placing the glass on a stable, unmoving surface and allowing it to be perfectly still. We do not fight the mud. We do not try to separate it from the water. We simply create the conditions of stillness and non-interference. And then, the universal laws of nature take over. Slowly, patiently, the heaviest particles of mud begin to settle. Then the lighter silt begins to drift downward. Over time, without any effort on our part other than maintaining the stillness, the mud gathers in a neat layer at the bottom of the glass. The water at the top becomes progressively clearer, until finally, it is perfectly transparent and still. You can now see right through it, as if the mud was never there. The mind is the water. The defilements are the mud. Samadhi is the practice of holding the mind still until its natural clarity reveals itself. However, having a glass of clear water with a layer of mud at the bottom is not the final goal. If you were to shake the glass again, the mud would immediately rise and cloud the water once more. The ultimate purpose of achieving this crystal clear state of mind is not just to enjoy the clarity, however blissful it may be. The purpose is to use the clarity to see something that was previously invisible. With this now stable, powerful, and transparent mind, we turn our attention back toward our own experience. We look deeply into the nature of the body, the feelings, the thoughts, the five aggregates, and with the laser-like power of the concentrated mind, we are no longer just thinking about the concepts of impermanence and no-self. We are seeing them directly. We can witness a thought arise, persist for a moment, and vanish. And in that direct seeing, we gain an unshakable insight into Anika. We can search for the I who is thinking, for the CEO in the control room. And with this new power of perception, we see with absolute certainty that it is not there. We experience the truth of anatta. Samadhi creates the perfect, silent laboratory for the explosion of liberating insight, or vipassana, to occur. It is the stable platform from which we see the true nature of reality. And that seeing is what cuts the roots of suffering forever. We have now traveled the full length of the Eightfold Path. We began with the wisdom of right view and intention. We built the foundation of an ethical life with right speech, action, and livelihood. And we have now completed the training of the mind itself through the harmonious interplay of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We have assembled a complete and powerful toolkit for the work of liberation. We are no longer the frightened person thrashing in the quicksand. We have become the calm observer, standing on the firm ground of samadhi, possessed of a mind that is both powerful and peaceful. With this newfound stability and clarity, we are finally ready to turn and face the most challenging aspects of our inner world, not with fear, but with a quiet confidence. We are ready to approach the monsters we have been running from our whole lives, our deepest fears, our most stubborn anger, our most profound sorrow sand, to sit with them, to listen to them, and to learn from them. The training is complete. The real-world application is about to begin. The path has led us here. We have walked the terrain of wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline. We have gathered the tools, a clear view of reality, a kind heart, a life of integrity, and a mind that is balanced, mindful, and concentrated. We have, in essence, constructed a safe and stable laboratory for the deepest work to begin. For our entire lives, we have been running from the monsters that live within the shadows of our own hearts. We have resisted our fear, suppressed our anger, denied our grief, and numbed our loneliness. This lifelong habit of resistance, this desperate fleeing from our own experience, has been the very source of our exhaustion and suffering. Now, with the toolkit of the path in hand, we no longer have to run. We have developed the strength and the wisdom to finally turn around, to stop, and to sit down with these so-called monsters, not as enemies to be slain, but as misunderstood messengers to be heard. Our old strategy for dealing with difficult emotions was always one of two extremes, both born from the thirst of vibhava tanha, the craving for an unpleasant experience to not exist. The first extreme was suppression. When a wave of anger or fear would arise, we would push it down, clench our jaw, and pretend it wasn't there. This is like holding a beach ball underwater. It requires a tremendous and constant expenditure of energy, and it creates a deep, abiding tension in our bodies and minds. And inevitably, when our guard is down, the suppressed emotion erupts with even greater force, often in inappropriate and destructive ways. The second extreme was indulgence. Instead of suppressing the emotion, we would become completely possessed by it. We would become the anger, lashing out with harsh words. We would become the fear, paralyzed and unable to act. In both cases, we are not free. We are slaves to the emotion, either by fighting it or by surrendering our will to it. The practice we have been training for offers a radical middle way between these two extremes. It is the path of mindful acceptance. This new way of relating to our difficult emotions can be understood as a simple, three-step process. The first step, when a powerful emotion like anger or fear arises, is to simply acknowledge and name it. Instead of our usual reaction of panic or resistance, we make a conscious choice to recognize what is happening. We use the simple and powerful technique of mental noting or labeling. With a soft, gentle inner voice, we simply name the experience. Anger, anger. Fear is present. This is grief. This simple act is profoundly transformative. It immediately creates a space between our awareness and the emotion itself. The experience is no longer "I am angry," which is a total identification. It becomes, there is a feeling of anger present in my experience, and I am the one who is aware of it. In that moment, the emotion is demoted from being the totality of who we are to being a temporary event that we are observing. The spell is broken. The second arrow of identification is stopped in its tracks. The second step is to move out of the story in our head and into the reality of our body. We do this by investigating the emotion with a gentle, bodily awareness. We shift our attention from the mental narrative, the story of who wronged us or what terrible thing might happen, and we ask a simple question: where does this emotion live in my body right now? We then begin a curious, scientific exploration. Where is this anger? Is it a fire in my chest? A tightness in my throat? A clenching in my fists? What are the raw, physical sensations of this fear? Is it a fluttering in my stomach? A coldness in my hands? A rapid heartbeat? We are not judging these sensations or wishing them away. We are simply gathering data, meeting the direct, physical reality of the emotion with a calm, interested curiosity. This act of turning toward the physical feeling with curiosity is the direct opposite of resistance. We are no longer running from the monster. We are gently reaching out a hand to feel its texture. This grounds us in the present moment and starves the emotion of the fuel of our catastrophic thinking. The third and final step is to simply allow the emotion to be there and to observe its impermanent nature. Having anchored our awareness in the physical sensations, we now practice letting go of any attempt to control or fix the feeling. We simply hold the sensations in a spacious, kind, and patient awareness. We are creating a safe container for the emotion to live out its natural life. And as we watch, we make a remarkable discovery. The emotion is not a solid, static block of anger or fear. It is a dynamic, vibrating field of energy. Its intensity ebbs and flows. The heat in the chest might flare up, then soften. The knot in the stomach might tighten, then loosen. By watching this process without interfering, we see the truth of anicca in our own bodies. We realize that we do not have to do anything about our emotions. They arise due to causes and conditions. They persist for a time. And, if we allow them the space to do so, they will pass away, all on their own. We learn, on a deep cellular level, that we can survive any emotional storm because we are the sky, not the storm. The supreme embodiment of this practice is found in the story of the Buddha's struggle on the night of his enlightenment. As he sat in deep meditation under the Bodhi tree, resolved not to move until he had found the end of suffering, the tempter Mara, the Lord of Illusion, launched a final, desperate assault. Mara represents all of our inner demons, the totality of our unwholesome conditioning. First, he sent his 3 beautiful daughters. Craving, discontent, and lust to seduce the Buddha with the promise of sense pleasures. The Buddha did not engage them, nor did he push them away. He simply sat in his awareness, and they, having no power over a mind free from thirst, were forced to retreat. Then, Mara unleashed his most terrifying forces. He summoned vast armies of demons, representing all the fears, anxieties, hatreds, and doubts that plague the human heart. They swarmed around the Buddha, howling and brandishing horrific weapons. They hurled spears of anger, arrows of despair, and rocks of doubt directly at him. But the Buddha did not move. He did not fight back. He did not resist. He remained perfectly still, his mind abiding in a state of unshakable equanimity and loving awareness. And a miracle occurred. As the deadly weapons flew through the air toward him, they were transformed. The spears and arrows turned into lotus blossoms, raining down around him like a fragrant offering. His non-resistance, his radical acceptance, had rendered the forces of fear utterly powerless. Finally, Mara himself, in all his fury, stood before him and demanded to know by what right he sought this ultimate freedom. The Buddha, saying nothing, simply lowered his right hand and touched the earth, and the earth itself bore witness to his worthiness. Defeated, Mara and all his hosts vanished like the morning mist. The Buddha had not won by fighting his demons. He had won by seeing them for what they were: empty, transient phenomena, meeting them with a calm, steady, and compassionate awareness. "I see you, Mara," was his silent, victorious refrain. This is the power we cultivate when we learn to sit with our own monsters. We discover that their terrifying masks are just a facade, and their weapons are made of smoke. By meeting our anger, fear, and grief with mindful, loving attention, we rob them of their power to control us. We transform them from terrifying demons into offerings of flowers. This practice develops a deep fearlessness and a profound inner peace. But it also does something more. When you become intimately familiar with the texture of your own fear, when you have held your own grief in a compassionate embrace, your heart naturally breaks open for others. You look out at the world and you see people acting out of their own anger, their own fear, their own pain, and you no longer see an enemy. You see a fellow being, also tormented by their own inner demons. The act of making peace with your own suffering is the most direct path to feeling true empathy and compassion for the suffering of all. Having learned to be kind to the monsters within, we are now ready to extend that kindness and compassion outward to all beings, without exception. The inner landscape has begun to transform. By turning to face our own anger, fear, and sorrow with the steady, gentle light of mindfulness, we have performed a kind of sacred alchemy. The monsters we once fled have revealed themselves to be nothing more than wounded parts of our own psyche, crying out for attention and acceptance. In sitting with them, in allowing them to be, we have not only discovered a profound inner fearlessness, but we have also stumbled upon the source code of empathy. To know the texture of your own suffering is to recognize it instantly in another. The peace we make within our own heart does not end there. It naturally seeks to radiate outward. The two are inseparable, like the two wings of a great bird. Wisdom is the wing that sees reality clearly, and compassion is the wing that responds to that reality with love. Both are required to fly. We now move from the passive acceptance of our own pain to the active cultivation of a boundless, compassionate heart. This is the practice of developing metta and karuna. Metta is a Pali word often translated as loving kindness. This is not the sentimental, romantic, or possessive love of songs and poems. Metta is an unconditional, benevolent goodwill. It is a steady, quiet, and powerful wish for the well-being of all beings, without exception and without expectation of anything in return. It is the simple, heartfelt intention. May you be happy. May you be well. Metta is the direct antidote to the poison of ill will, hatred, resentment, and anger. While anger contracts the mind and heart, creating a tight, painful prison of me versus you, metta expands the heart, dissolving these boundaries and filling the mind with a spacious, warm light. It is the conscious, continuous decision to feed the wolf of kindness. Flowing from metta is its inseparable companion, karuna, or compassion. If loving kindness is the wish for others to be happy, compassion is the wish for them to be free from suffering. The word compassion literally means to suffer with. It is the heart's natural trembling in the face of pain, whether our own or another's indoming. It is crucial to distinguish true compassion from its near enemy, pity. Pity looks down from a position of superiority. It says, "Oh, you poor thing, how terrible your situation is," and in doing so, it reinforces the separation between the observer and the sufferer. Compassion, on the other hand, stands alongside. It says, "I see your pain. I recognize this feeling. We are in this together." It is born from the wise understanding of our shared humanity, the recognition that all beings are subject to the laws of anicca, anatta, and dukkha. It is the antidote to cruelty, indifference, and the urge to harm. These qualities of heart are not merely emotions we hope to feel one day. They are skills that can be intentionally cultivated through meditation, a practice that systematically opens and softens the heart. Let us walk through the classic stages of metta meditation. We begin, always, with ourselves. This is not a selfish act. It is an essential one. You cannot draw water from an empty well. If your own heart is filled with self-criticism and judgment, you have no genuine kindness to offer another. So, finding a comfortable posture, we turn our awareness inward and begin to offer the phrases of goodwill to ourselves, silently repeating them with sincere intention. May I be happy. May I be healthy in body and in mind. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I live with ease. We may not feel happy or at ease in the moment, and that is perfectly fine. We are not trying to fabricate a feeling, but to plant a seed. We are setting an intention, watering the roots of self-compassion. Once we have established a foundation of kindness for ourselves, we expand the circle of goodwill. We bring to mind a dear friend or a benefactor, someone for whom we feel easy and uncomplicated affection. We hold their image in our mind, and we extend the very same wishes to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. We let our heart connect with our genuine appreciation for this person, allowing the feeling of warmth to flow from us to them. This stage is usually pleasant and helps to strengthen the flow of our benevolent intention. Next, we stretch the muscle of the heart. We bring to mind a neutral person. This is someone we see regularly, but for whom we feel neither strong like nor dislike: a cashier at the grocery store, a person we see on our daily commute, a neighbor we barely know. We hold this person in our mind, and just as we did for our friend, we offer them the same wholehearted wishes. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. In this stage, we are training the heart to overcome the barrier of indifference. We are acknowledging the full humanity of a person who is normally just part of the background of our lives, recognizing that they, too, just want to be happy. Now comes the most challenging and transformative stage of the practice. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict, resentment, or anger. It is wise to start with someone only mildly irritating, not the subject of our deepest wounds. The practice here is subtle and profound. We are not trying to condone their harmful actions or force ourselves to like them. We are attempting to see the suffering behind their actions. We recognize that their harmful behavior springs from their own greed, hatred, and delusion from their own dukkha. And so, we offer them the wish to be free from that very suffering. Just as I wish to be happy, may you too find true happiness. May you be free from the anger that causes you to suffer. May you be free from the delusion that causes you to harm others. This is a powerful act of healing, not for them, but for us. It is the act of voluntarily taking the antidote for the poison of resentment we have been carrying in our own heart. Finally, having worked through these specific categories, we allow the heart to become boundless. We radiate the energy of metta and karuna in all directions: front, back, left, right, above, and below. We extend it to all beings in our city, our country, and throughout the world. We extend it to all animals, all creatures seen and unseen, in all realms of existence. We hold the entire world in our compassionate embrace with the all-encompassing wish. May all beings everywhere, without exception, be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. In this final stage, the ego's boundaries of us and them, friend and enemy, completely dissolve into a single, unified field of compassionate awareness. The Buddha once offered a powerful image for this boundless heart. He said, just as a mother would protect with her own life, her own child, her only child, so should one cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Reflect on the quality of that mother's love. It is fierce, unconditional, and utterly non-negotiable. It does not depend on whether the child is well-behaved or deserves it. It is a protective, life-giving force that springs from the deepest part of her being. The spiritual path is the training to cultivate this same quality of heart and to extend it universally, beyond the confines of our own biological family to the entire family of living beings. This compassion is not just a nice feeling, it is the natural expression of deep wisdom. When you have looked at your own mind and seen the truth of anatta, you realize there is no solid, separate self to defend. When you look at another person, you see the same selfless process, the same 5 aggregates in flux. When you have looked at your own heart and seen the universal nature of dukkha, you recognize the same thirsts and fears driving the actions of others. In that clear seeing, how could hatred or cruelty possibly arise? To harm another is, from this perspective, as senseless as your left hand wanting to harm your right. Compassion is the only logical, sane response to the reality of our profound interconnectedness. By making peace with the monsters within, and by actively cultivating a heart of goodwill and compassion, our entire stance toward the world begins to shift. We are no longer living from a defensive crouch, seeing the world as a source of potential threats and frustrations. We begin to stand with an open, receptive posture, seeing the world as a field for the practice of kindness and understanding. This fundamental shift in orientation will inevitably change how we navigate our most intimate and challenging terrain, our relationships with other human beings. The loving heart we have cultivated must now learn how to express itself skillfully in our interactions with our partners, our families, our friends, and our colleagues. Our relationships now become our practice ground. We have walked the inner path. We have sat with our own demons and learned to greet them with a calm and steady awareness. We have cultivated a heart that wishes well for all beings, a boundless compassion that springs from the wisdom of our shared condition. The inner garden is now tended with kindness, but a garden is not a sealed biosphere. It is part of a larger ecosystem. Our practice does not exist in a vacuum. It is tested, refined, and brought to life in the messy, beautiful, and often challenging ecosystem of our relationships with other people. It is here, in our interactions with partners, family, friends, and colleagues, that our practice moves from the meditation cushion into the heart of daily life. Relationships, from this perspective, are not a problem to be solved or a source of happiness to be secured. They are our most profound and potent spiritual laboratory, the dojo where our attachments, our fears, and our capacity for love are revealed with unflinching honesty. The primary reason our relationships are such a fertile ground for suffering is that they are the arena where the ego's deepest attachments and resistances play out. We enter into relationships not as two whole beings meeting in the present, but as two bundles of history, expectation, and unresolved need. The root of nearly all relational conflict can be traced back to the same source as all our other suffering, clinging or upadana. We cling, most powerfully, to our expectations. We carry around a detailed, unconscious blueprint of how our partner should act, how our parents should treat us, how our children should behave. We expect them to meet our needs, to understand our minds without us having to speak, to validate our worldview, to behave in predictable and pleasing ways. This blueprint is a fantasy, a story written by our own ego. when the actual, living, breathing person in front of us inevitably deviates from this script, which they always will, because they are a free, complex, and ever-changing being. Just like us, we experience a sense of shock, betrayal, and pain. Our suffering is not caused by their action, but by the gap between their action and our expectation. The conflict is the friction between reality and our resistance to that reality. Beyond expectations, we cling to our stories about people. We create a fixed, static character in our mind and label it my spouse or my mother. This character is built from a collage of past memories, judgments, and grievances. He is always so forgetful. She is always so critical. Once this character is created, our ego acts like a biased prosecutor, constantly gathering evidence to confirm the story, while dismissing any evidence to the contrary. When your critical mother says 9 kind things and 1 slightly critical thing, your mind will obsess over the 1 critical comment because it confirms the story. You are no longer in a relationship with the actual human being in front of you, who is a dynamic process of anicca and anatta, constantly changing. You are in a relationship with the ghost of your own creation, a fictional character you carry around in your head. Is it any wonder, then, that we feel so lonely and misunderstood? We are having conversations with ghosts and then feeling frustrated when the living person doesn't follow the ghost's script. The way out of this prison of expectation and story is to bring the tools we have cultivated into the heart of our interactions. The practice is to transform our relationships into a field of mindfulness. This begins with the radical act of deep listening. Most of the time, when we believe we are listening to someone, we are actually engaged in a frantic internal monologue. We are judging what they are saying. We are comparing it to our own experiences. And most of all, we are formulating our rebuttal, waiting for them to take a breath so we can jump in and make our own point. This is not listening, it is reloading. Deep listening is the practice of setting aside our own inner commentary and offering the other person the rare and precious gift of our full, undivided, non-judgmental attention. It is listening with the sole intention of understanding their world as they see it. This means paying attention not just to their words, but to their tone of voice, their body language, the emotions simmering beneath the surface. It means being more interested in what it feels like to be them in that moment than in being right. It can be supported by the simple practice of reflecting back what you hear. It sounds like you're feeling exhausted and unappreciated. Is that right? When a person feels truly seen and heard, without judgment, a space of trust and connection opens up that can heal almost any conflict. This must be paired with mindful speech. Having cultivated right intention, we can bring a new awareness to our words. In moments of conflict, the temptation is to speak from a place of reactivity, to use words as weapons to defend our ego or attack theirs. The practice is to introduce a sacred pause. Before speaking, we can take a single, conscious breath. In that space, we can check our intention. Am I about to speak to prove my point and win the argument? Or am I about to speak to foster understanding and restore harmony? That one breath can be the difference between escalating a war and building a bridge. We learn to speak from our own experience using I statements. I feel hurt when this happens, which are irrefutable, instead of accusatory you statements. You always do this, which immediately trigger defensiveness. Perhaps the most transformative practice of all is to see the dukkha in the other person. When your partner or friend is acting out of anger, fear, or insecurity, their behavior is their monster. It is their second arrow. They are caught in the grip of their own suffering. The untrained mind reacts to the behavior, the symptom, with its own defensiveness and anger. The trained mind, imbued with karuna or compassion, learns to look behind the behavior to its source. It sees not an adversary, but a fellow being who is suffering. When you can genuinely see that the other person's hurtful words are coming from their own deep pain, your heart naturally softens. You are no longer in a battle between two egos. You are two human beings, both struggling, both imperfect, both just wanting to be happy. This perspective shift is a complete game changer. It allows you to respond to their anger not with more anger, but with a quiet understanding that can de-escalate the entire situation. This leads to the profound practice of letting go of the need to be right. The ego is addicted to being right. Being right proves its existence, solidifies its worldview, and gives it a momentary feeling of superiority and control. This addiction is the source of endless, draining arguments about trivial things. In any disagreement, we can learn to ask ourselves a powerful question. What do I want more in this moment? The satisfaction of proving my point, or the peace of this relationship? This does not mean abandoning our principles or becoming a doormat. It means consciously choosing our battles. It means recognizing that winning an argument is often a hollow victory that comes at the cost of intimacy and trust. To deliberately let go of the need to have the last word is a powerful act of renunciation, a letting go of the ego for the sake of love. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly captures this practice of letting go within our relationships. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long pilgrimage. They came to a river where the current was strong and the muddy banks were slippery. A beautiful young woman in fine clothes stood there, afraid to cross for fear of ruining her dress. The monks' vows were strict. They were forbidden from making physical contact with a woman. The junior monk, pious and rigid, immediately averted his gaze, but the senior monk saw the woman's genuine distress. Without a word, he walked over to her, lifted her into his arms, carried her across the turbulent river, and gently set her down on the other side. She thanked him, and he nodded, and the two monks continued on their way. For hours, they walked in silence. But the junior monk was seething. His mind was a storm of judgment and agitation. How could his master have so brazenly broken their sacred vows? Finally, he could bear it no longer. He burst out, "Brother, I cannot believe what you did back there. Our vows are sacred. We are forbidden to even touch a woman, and you picked one up in your arms and carried her across the river. How could you?" The senior monk looked over at his troubled companion with a calm, gentle expression. "Brother," he said softly, "I set that woman down by the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story reveals a profound truth about our minds. We are constantly carrying people around in our heads long after the interaction is over. We carry the ghosts of past hurts, the weight of old grievances, the heavy burden of our judgments and stories. We replay conversations. We fume over perceived slights. We cling to our resentments. The practice of mindfulness in relationships is the practice of learning to set the woman down. It is the practice of meeting each moment and each person afresh, without the heavy baggage of the past. It is the courage to let go of the story and relate to the person who is actually here, now. When we begin to see our relationships through this lens, everything changes. They are no longer a source of frustration, but a rich and continuous opportunity for practice. Every conversation is a chance to practice deep listening. Every disagreement is a chance to practice letting go of being right. Every moment of another person's pain is a chance to practice compassion. The people in our lives become our greatest teachers, mirroring back to us our own attachments, our own judgments, and our own capacity for wisdom and love. Having explored this deeply personal and fertile ground, we now turn our attention to another major arena of modern life, where our ego, our desires, and our resistance are constantly engaged. The world of our work, our ambitions, and our complex relationship with success and failure. Having turned the revealing light of our practice onto the intimate dojo of our personal relationships, we now carry that light into the public square, into the arena where so many of us spend the majority of our waking hours, our work. For modern people, our career is not just a way to earn a living. It is often a primary source of our identity, our self-worth, and our most profound anxieties. The world of work is a churning cauldron of ambition, competition, success, and failure. It is where the ego's deep thirst to become something, the craving of bhava-tanha, is at its most powerful, and where our fear of not being good enough is most acute. The central question we face here is a vital one. Is it possible to be engaged, creative, and even ambitious in our work without being a slave to the stress, burnout, and dissatisfaction it so often generates? The wisdom of the path shows us that it is, by teaching us the subtle art of working without attachment. The first step is to redefine our understanding of ambition itself. The Buddhist path does not advocate for passivity, laziness, or a lack of purpose. The problem is not the desire to use our talents or to contribute to the world. The problem is the nature of the thirst behind that desire. We must distinguish between healthy aspiration and neurotic clinging. Healthy aspiration is rooted in right intention. It is the joyful wish to apply our skills, to create something of value, to be of service to others, to learn and to grow. With healthy aspiration, the fulfillment is found in the process of the work itself. The journey is the destination. Neurotic clinging, on the other hand, is fueled by the hungry ego. The work is seen merely as a means to an end: the promotion, the higher salary, the public recognition, the corner office. Our happiness becomes entirely conditional on achieving these external results. When our well-being is chained to outcomes that are largely outside of our control, we have written a personal recipe for chronic anxiety, frustration, and disappointment. The work itself, which could be a source of great satisfaction, becomes tainted with the poison of fear. The path offers a way to transform our workplace from a source of stress into a field of practice. This begins with bringing right livelihood into our modern context. While we may not have complete freedom to choose a perfectly harmless and beneficial career, we can always bring an intention of harmlessness and service to the work we do. We can choose to be the person in the office who is honest, who does not engage in gossip, who supports their colleagues. We can look for ways our work can genuinely help others, no matter how small. This shift in intention can change our entire relationship to our daily tasks. But the practice becomes even more granular. We can practice mindfulness in the midst of a busy workday. Instead of frantically multitasking, which studies show is inefficient and stressful, we can practice single tasking. When you write an email, just write the email. When you are in a meeting, just be in the meeting. Bring your full, undivided attention to one thing at a time. This not only improves the quality of your work, but transforms it into a calming, centering practice. Furthermore, we can use our breath as a secret refuge throughout the day. Before entering a stressful meeting, take 3 conscious breaths. After a difficult phone call, pause and feel the sensation of 1 full inhalation and exhalation. This simple act can reset the nervous system and pull the mind out of a reactive spiral. The workplace is a hotbed for our resistant, egoic reactions. We can use mindfulness to notice these thoughts as they arise. This is so unfair. I can't believe she got the credit for my work. I'll never get this all done. The practice is not to deny these thoughts, but to see them for what they are: temporary mental events, clouds passing through the sky of our awareness. When we see them as stories rather than as absolute truths, they lose their power to dictate our mood and our actions. We create a space of clarity between the stimulus of an event and our response to it. This leads us to the most powerful practice for finding peace at work: the art of letting go of outcomes. The formula is simple in its instruction, though a lifetime's work in its application. Pour your heart and soul into the process, and then completely, utterly, release your attachment to the result. Do your absolute best work, with full attention and care, and then let it go. This applies equally to success and failure. When a project succeeds and you receive praise, the practice is to enjoy it fully, but lightly. Receive the praise, feel the satisfaction, and then let it pass through you without letting it inflate your ego. See it as a pleasant but impermanent weather pattern. If you cling to it and make it part of your identity, I am a successful person, you have just built the first floor of a future prison of fear, the fear of not being able to repeat that success. When you experience failure, a project doesn't work out, you are criticized. You don't get the job. This is an even more potent opportunity for practice. The first arrow is the external event of the failure. It stings. The practice is to allow yourself to feel that sting without firing the second arrow of self-judgment. The second arrow is the ego story. I am a failure. This proves I'm not good enough. My career is over. This is the voice of delusion. The practice of letting go is to separate the event from your identity. You can learn from your mistakes without believing you are the mistake. This is where the insight into anatta, no self, becomes profoundly practical and liberating. If there is no solid, permanent, unchanging self to be a success or a failure, then these events are simply experiences that arise and pass away. We can meet them with curiosity and resilience, rather than with ego-crushing despair. There is a concept from Taoist philosophy which deeply resonates with Zen Buddhism, known as Wu Wei. It is often translated as non-action or effortless action. This does not mean being lazy or passive. It points to a state of acting in perfect harmony with the natural flow of things, a state of relaxed, focused engagement where struggle ceases. Think of a master carpenter. She does not fight the wood. She understands its grain, its nature, and she works with it. Her effort is not tense and strained. It is relaxed, intuitive, and precise. In these moments of deep absorption in her craft, her sense of a separate self, her ego, seems to dissolve. There is no her and the wood. There is only the process of sawing, of sanding, of joining. There is only the work flowing through her. This is the state of wu-wei. It is the antithesis of the ego-driven, tense striving that leads to burnout. It is the practice of bringing our full presence and skill to the task at hand, while letting go of our frantic need to control the outcome. We do our part, and we allow the universe to do its part. Ultimately, finding peace at work is not about changing our external circumstances. It is not about finding the perfect job that will have no frustrations or challenges. Such a job does not exist. It is about fundamentally changing our inner relationship to the work we do. It is about unhooking our sense of well-being from the volatile, unpredictable roller coaster of external praise and blame, success and failure. Much of the stress we feel in our professional lives comes from a deep-seated feeling of not enough salary, not enough recognition, not enough status. This feeling is a powerful form of resistance against our present reality. It is the engine that drives us to constantly want more, to accumulate more, not just as a means of survival, but as a way to soothe the ego's insecurity. This pervasive feeling of lack is the very foundation of materialism, a core source of dissatisfaction in our modern world. And it is to this great illusion that we must now turn our attention. From the intimate dojo of our relationships and the demanding arena of our work, we now turn to an even broader field of practice, our relationship with the material world itself. Our journey has shown us that the feeling of not enough is a powerful source of our suffering. We feel we are not loved enough, not successful enough, not safe enough. In our modern society, this deep, existential feeling of lack has been harnessed and amplified into a deafening cultural roar. It is the engine of materialism, the pervasive belief that the treasure we seek, the happiness, contentment, and security we long for, can be found by accumulating things in the external world. This is perhaps the most widespread and seductive delusion of our time, and to see through it is to take a giant leap toward inner freedom. Our consumer culture is a masterful architect of dukkha. Its primary function, through the relentless machinery of advertising and social comparison, is to cultivate and prey upon our tanha, our insatiable thirst. It is a system designed to make us feel perpetually incomplete. It works by first creating a problem, a subtle sense of lack or anxiety you didn't even know you had. Your car is not new enough. Your phone is not smart enough. Your clothes are not fashionable enough. Your body is not thin or muscular enough. Once this disease of dissatisfaction has been planted in the mind, the system immediately offers a cure, a product. This car will make you feel powerful and free. This makeup will make you feel beautiful and worthy. This vacation will bring you adventure and escape. It is a perfect, externalized dramatization of the cycle of craving. It manufactures the thirst, and then offers to quench it with salt water. The momentary relief of the purchase soon fades, as the law of anicca dictates, and the underlying feeling of lack returns, now demanding a new product, a new fix. We are placed on a treadmill of wanting, a frantic pursuit that has no finish line, because the feeling of enough is always deferred to the next acquisition. The core miscalculation behind materialism is a simple but profound one. We are looking for an internal state in an external place. We do not truly want the new car. We want the feeling of freedom and status we believe it will provide. We do not truly want the designer handbag. We want the feeling of being seen as sophisticated and valuable. We do not want the bigger house. We want the feeling of security and success. We are chasing feelings, not things. We are trying to solve a deep spiritual thirst with material objects. But peace, security, and a sense of worth are not commodities that can be bought and sold. They are qualities of mind that can only be cultivated from within. The wisdom of the path teaches us that as long as we continue to seek our well-being in things that are outside of us and are, by their nature, impermanent, our frustration is guaranteed. The search is doomed from the start because we are digging in the wrong mine. The direct antidote to the poison of materialism is the cultivation of santuti, a Pali word that means contentment. Contentment is not a passive resignation to a life of mediocrity. It is not giving up on improving our lives. Rather, contentment is a radical and joyful acceptance of what is already present. It is the profound and liberating realization that our fundamental well-being does not depend on acquiring anything more than what we already have. It is a shift in vision from focusing on what is lacking in our lives to focusing on what is abundant. It is the practice of gratitude. We can actively cultivate contentment by taking time each day to consciously appreciate the simple gifts of our existence. The roof over our head, the food we have to eat, the simple fact that our body is breathing and our heart is beating, the presence of a friend, the beauty of a tree outside our window. Gratitude is the sworn enemy of the feeling of lack. When the mind is filled with appreciation for what is here, it has no room for craving what is not. Contentment is the discovery that we are already standing on treasure. It is a feeling of inner richness that makes the exhausting, frantic pursuit of outer riches seem hollow and unnecessary. We can bring this spirit of contentment into a concrete practice of mindful consumption. This is the art of bringing a calm, clear awareness to the very act of wanting and buying. Before making a purchase, especially one that is not a basic necessity, we can introduce a mindful pause and ask ourselves a series of honest questions. First, what is the feeling that is driving this desire right now? Am I feeling bored, lonely, insecure, or anxious? Am I trying to use this purchase to numb or escape an uncomfortable feeling? Second, what is the story I am telling myself about this object? What do I truly believe it will do for me? Will it really bring me lasting happiness or just a temporary thrill? Third, can I just sit with this feeling of wanting for a few minutes without needing to immediately act on it? What does the craving itself feel like as a pure sensation in my body? This practice inserts a powerful wedge of awareness between the arising of the impulse and the habitual action of buying. It allows us to see the craving for what it is, just another interesting, impermanent cloud passing through the sky of our mind, not a command that must be obeyed. We begin to reclaim our freedom from the tyranny of our own artificially induced desires. There is an ancient Buddhist parable that speaks directly to this human condition. A poor man, destitute and homeless, went to visit a wealthy and compassionate friend. The friend, overjoyed to see him, prepared a great feast and offered him a comfortable place to sleep. During the night, as the poor man slept, the wealthy friend took a priceless, wish-fulfilling jewel and with great care, secretly sewed it into the lining of his friend's tattered coat. He wanted to give his friend the means to end his suffering, but he did so secretly to avoid making him feel like a charity case. The next morning, the poor man thanked his friend and departed, completely unaware of the incalculable treasure he was now carrying with him. For years, he wandered the land as a beggar, struggling for every scrap of food, sleeping in the cold, living a life of profound hardship and despair, always feeling that he had nothing. One day, many years later, he happened to meet his old, wealthy friend again. The friend was astonished to see him still dressed in rags and emaciated from hunger. "My dear friend," he exclaimed, "why are you still living this life of misery? I gave you the means to have anything you could ever desire, long ago." He then reached over, tore open the lining of the poor man's worn-out coat, and revealed the brilliant, flawless jewel that had been there all along. The man stared in utter disbelief. He had possessed the source of all possible wealth and security for years, but because he was unaware of it, he had lived as a pauper. We are all this man. We wander through the world seeking our treasure in external places. We seek it in possessions, in status, in relationships, in experiences. We feel a constant sense of lack, of poverty of spirit, because we are looking for our wealth outside of ourselves. We are completely unaware that the priceless jewel of our own awakened nature, innate capacity for peace, wisdom, contentment, and love is already sewn into the very fabric of our being. The spiritual path is not a journey to acquire a jewel we do not have. It is the process of becoming aware of the treasure we have been carrying all along. Overcoming materialism, then, is not about hating things or forcing ourselves to live a life of stark austerity. It is about this fundamental shift in where we search for our treasure. It is about letting go of our resistance to not having enough. This act of letting go of our resistance to our feelings, to other people, to outcomes at work, and now to our craving for things points toward a deep and unifying principle. As we let go of our clinging to a pleasant feeling, we see that it is empty of permanence. As we let go of our fixed ideas about other people, we see that they are empty of a solid, unchanging essence. As we let go of our need for possessions to make us happy, we see that they are empty of any inherent power to provide lasting peace. This recurring theme of emptiness is not a terrifying void, but a doorway to the most profound freedom. It is to this great, liberating wisdom of emptiness, or sunyata, that our path now leads. Our journey of letting go has brought us to the final frontier of the mind. We have peeled back the layers of our experience, seeing through the illusion of permanence in the world around us. We have investigated the self we hold so dear and found not a solid entity, but a selfless, flowing process. We have examined our attachments to outcomes, to relationships, and to material things, and found them all to be sources of a deep and subtle dissatisfaction. In each of these inquiries, we have performed an act of emptying our experience of our false projections and mistaken beliefs. We now arrive at the great unifying principle that underlies all of these insights, a teaching that represents the pinnacle of Buddhist wisdom. It is a concept so profound it can feel intimidating, and so misunderstood it can sound frightening. It is the teaching on sunyata, or emptiness. Before we proceed, we must clear the air of the immense misunderstanding that surrounds this word. To the Western ear, conditioned to value substance and presence, emptiness sounds like a terrifying void, a cold, nihilistic nothingness. It conjures images of lack, of absence, of a meaningless universe. But this is a complete misinterpretation. The Buddhist concept of emptiness is not a statement about the absence of existence. It is a statement about the nature of existence. It is not a void, but a vibrant, dynamic, and liberating reality. It is not a lack, but a presence of infinite potential. It is the key that unlocks the final door of the ego's prison. The central question to ask is, empty of what? The teaching of Sunyata states that all phenomena, every object, every person, every thought, every feeling are empty of one specific thing. They are empty of a separate, independent, intrinsic nature. Nothing in the entire cosmos exists on its own, from its own side, isolated and disconnected from everything else. Everything is what it is only in relation to other things. Its very existence is dependent, conditioned, and relational. Perhaps the most helpful analogy is that of a wave on the ocean. A wave certainly exists. We can see it rise, crest, and fall. It has form, energy, and a distinct appearance. But can we find a wave that is separate from the ocean? Can we extract the wave from the water? Of course not. The wave is a temporary form that the ocean is taking. It is entirely dependent on the water, the wind, the seafloor, and all the other conditions that allow it to arise. It is empty of a separate wave self. Its entire being is the being of the ocean. It is a verb, not a noun and active waving. In the same way, everything in the universe is a temporary form, a waving of the totality. This profound truth of emptiness has a positive counterpart, another side of the same coin. Because all things are empty of a separate self, it means they are all radically interconnected and mutually dependent. This is the teaching of pratityasamutpada, or dependent origination. This intimidating sounding term points to a simple and beautiful truth. Nothing can exist in isolation. Everything inter-is. Consider a single sheet of paper. If we look deeply into it, we can see a cloud. Without the cloud, there is no rain. Without the rain, the tree cannot grow. Without the tree, we cannot make paper. So the cloud is in the paper. If we look further, we see the sun. Without the sunshine, the tree cannot perform photosynthesis. So the sun is in the paper. We see the logger who cut the tree, and the logger's parents who gave him life. We see the wheat that made the bread he ate for breakfast. We see the soil, the earth, the entire cosmos. If we were to remove any one of these elements, the sheet of paper could not exist. It is empty of a separate, independent paper self. Its entire existence is a web of interconnection with the entire universe. This is the truth of interbeing. Now, let us apply this to ourselves. We have already seen through the analysis of the 5 aggregates that there is no solid, separate self to be found within us. Now we see it from the outside in. You cannot exist without the air you are breathing, the food you are eating, the language you learned from your culture, the endless chain of ancestors who came before you. The line that the ego so carefully draws between me and not me is a fiction. You do not stop at your skin. You inter-are with the whole of reality. To see this is to experience a profound shift from the ego's lonely isolation to a boundless sense of belonging. The universe is not a foreign place you inhabit. It is the very fabric of your being. This understanding utterly dissolves the foundation of our resistance. How can you maintain anger at another person when you see that you inter-are with them? How can you cling desperately to one part of reality while pushing another away when you see that all parts are inextricably linked in a single, seamless web? To resist one thing is to resist the entire cosmos. The most famous and concise articulation of this wisdom comes from the Heart Sutra, which boldly declares, "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." Let us unpack this profound statement. Form is emptiness means that everything we perceive in the world of form, a table, a tree, our own body, a thought is, when we examine it deeply, found to be empty of a separate, independent essence. It is like the wave. Its form is empty of a wave self. This first part is the wisdom of deconstruction, seeing through the illusion of solidity. But the second half is equally crucial. Emptiness is form. This prevents us from falling into nihilism, from believing that emptiness is some kind of blank nothingness that exists apart from the world. It means that this very emptiness, this boundless potential, expresses itself as the world of form. The only way the ocean can be an ocean is by taking the form of waves. The only way emptiness can be what it is through the vibrant, colorful, ever-changing dance of the phenomenal world. Emptiness is not a rejection of the world. It is the very nature of the world. The emptiness and the form, the ultimate and the relative, are not two different things. They are two aspects of one undivided reality. Think of a dance. The emptiness is the open space of the dance floor, the potential for movement. The form is the dancers and their intricate, beautiful movements. You cannot have the dance without the dancers, and the dancers cannot dance without the empty space of the floor. They depend on each other. They co-arise. They are two inseparable dimensions of a single event. Therefore, to realize emptiness is not to see a black void. It is to see this world, the one right in front of us, with new eyes. It is to see the sacred in the ordinary. It is to see the interconnectedness in every object, the impermanence in every moment, the selflessness in every being. This realization is not a subtraction from life. It is an infinite addition. It is the source of true freedom and creativity, because things are empty of a fixed, concrete nature. They are full of potential. If a seed were not empty of a solid seedness, it could never die as a seed and be reborn as a tree. If you were not empty of a fixed, unchanging personality, you could never learn, grow, forgive, or transform. Emptiness is the very ground of possibility. It is the ultimate antidote to the feeling of being trapped, stuck, or defined by your past. It is the radical permission to change. With this unifying insight, the entire architecture of our resistance finally and completely collapses. What is there to cling to when the object of our desire is seen to be empty of any power to provide lasting happiness? Who is there to do the clinging when the I is seen to be empty of a solid self? What is there to resist when the object of our aversion is seen to be inextricably interconnected with our own being? The battle ends because we realize we have only ever been fighting ourselves. We have been a single wave, resisting the movement of the ocean of which it is a part. This profound, liberating insight fundamentally alters our relationship to every aspect of our lives, especially our difficulties. The problems, the pains, the challenges, the traffic jam, the difficult colleague, the chronic illness, the arising of our own fear are no longer seen as external obstacles that are in the way of our spiritual path. We begin to understand that these challenges are not in the way, they are the way. The friction of life is the very substance of our practice. The obstacle itself becomes the doorway to awakening. It is here, in this final integration, that our entire journey comes full circle. We have journeyed from the churning surface of our resistance to the profound, silent depths of emptiness. We have followed the physician's diagnosis, identified the cause of our disease, and walked the prescribed path of treatment. We have sharpened our tools of wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline. The natural question that arises now is, what is the goal of all this? Is the aim to reach a state of perfect, unshakable bliss, a heavenly realm where problems no longer touch us and difficulties cease to exist? Is the purpose of the path to finally arrive at a destination where the road is smooth, straight, and free of all obstacles? This is a common and deeply human hope, but it is based on a final, subtle misunderstanding. The purpose of the practice is not to eliminate the obstacles in our lives. The purpose of the practice is to realize that the obstacles are our lives. The goal is not to clear the path. It is to understand that the path is the obstacle itself. For most of our lives, we operate under the delusion that our spiritual practice is something separate from our real life. We think of our practice as the time we spend on the meditation cushion, the books we read, the peaceful moments we can carve out. We see our difficulties, the stressful project at work, the argument with our spouse, the onset of an illness, the wave of anxiety as unfortunate interruptions to our practice, as annoying roadblocks on our spiritual journey. We think, if only I didn't have to deal with this problem, then I could really focus on my path. But this is the final trick of the ego, the last vestige of resistance. This view creates a fundamental separation between practice and life. The ultimate integration, the final letting go, is to dissolve this boundary completely. It is to see that the stressful project at work is your opportunity to practice non-attachment to outcomes. The argument with your spouse is your chance to practice deep listening and compassion. The illness is your profound teaching on impermanence. The wave of anxiety is your chance to sit with a monster and realize it cannot harm you. Every time you feel that familiar inner clenching of resistance, that no to the way things are, this is not a failure. It is a gift. It is a bell of mindfulness, ringing loud and clear, waking you up from the dream of your preferences and inviting you back to reality. The moment of irritation is a call to practice patience. The moment of fear is a call to practice courage and trust. The moment of judgment is a call to practice compassion. The moments we have labeled bad or negative are, in fact, our greatest opportunities for growth. They are the grit that allows the pearl of wisdom to form. The smooth, easy parts of life teach us very little. It is in the friction, in the places where our ego chafes against reality, that the real work is done and the real transformation occurs. Therefore, we learn to reframe our entire approach to difficulty. When an obstacle appears, the first step is to acknowledge it not as a problem, but as the curriculum. The lesson on patience has arrived. We then bring our tools to the experience. We meet the raw feeling of the difficulty with the non-judgmental awareness of mindfulness. We investigate its sensations in the body with a gentle curiosity. We hold our own frustration and pain with the warmth of metta and karuna, the self-compassion we have cultivated. And then, we can apply the lens of wisdom. We can look at the problem and remind ourselves of its nature. We see its impermanence, anicca, knowing that this difficulty too shall pass. We investigate the I who is having the problem and see the lack of a solid, separate self, anatta, which depersonalizes the struggle. And we can reflect on the vast, interconnected web of causes and conditions that brought this moment into being, the truth of sunyata, which helps us to release our narrow, self-centered view of the situation. The obstacle is not destroyed, it is metabolized. It is transformed from a solid rock into nourishing food for our journey. There is no more powerful symbol for this process in all of Eastern thought than the lotus flower. The lotus is an object of breathtaking beauty. Its petals are perfectly formed, its color is pristine, and it rises above the water with an air of transcendent grace and purity. It is the ultimate symbol of enlightenment and the awakened heart. But where does this perfect flower grow? The lotus does not grow in a manicured, sterile garden. It does not grow on a high and dry mountaintop. The lotus flower grows only out of the thick, dark, smelly mud at the bottom of a murky pond. The mud is the raw, messy, and often unpleasant stuff of our lives. It is our dukkha or grief, our confusion, our anger, our failures, our sickness, our pain. For most of our lives, we try to avoid the mud. We try to climb out of it, to deny its existence, to pretend we are not rooted in it. The great wisdom of the path is the realization that the mud is not the enemy. The mud is the very source of nourishment that the lotus requires. Without the rich, dark, fertile mud, the lotus blossom could never emerge. Its beauty is not born in spite of the mud, but because of it. In the same way, our wisdom, our compassion, and our freedom are not born in spite of our suffering. They are born directly out of a wise and compassionate engagement with our suffering. We do not find enlightenment by escaping the mud of our lives, but by learning to sink our roots deep into it, to embrace its richness, and to use its energy to grow toward the light. Our deepest wounds become the source of our greatest strength. Our challenges are the very substance of our awakening. This understanding leads to a fundamental shift in our deepest aspiration. Our old prayer, spoken or unspoken, was always, "Please, grant me a life without problems." We now see this as a childish wish for the impossible, a prayer that guarantees disappointment. Our new aspiration, born from wisdom, becomes, "May I have the strength, the clarity, and the compassion to meet whatever arises in my life with peace." This is a shift from trying to control the uncontrollable external world to cultivating our own internal resources. We no longer ask for a calmer sea. We ask for a stronger vessel and a more skillful sailor. This places the power and the responsibility for our well-being exactly where it has always been, within our own mind and heart. We cease to be victims of circumstance and become conscious participants in our own unfolding, capable of transforming any situation into a part of the path. And so our long journey through the landscape of the mind comes full circle. We began thrashing in the quicksand, resisting our reality. Now we see that the quicksand was never the problem. Our struggle against it was. By learning to relax, to be present, to allow, and to flow with the nature of what is, we find an unexpected buoyancy. We learn to float. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be experienced. Letting go is not a singular event that we accomplish once and for all. It is a continuous, moment-by-moment practice of meeting our ever-changing experience with an open, curious, and non-resistant awareness. The work is never finished because life itself is the work, and the path is not a line that leads to a faraway destination. The path is this very moment, this very breath, this very obstacle, met with the fullness of our awakened heart. We began our journey together in a place of struggle, caught in the terrifying grip of quicksand. Our instincts screamed at us to fight, to thrash, to resist the pull from below. And in that desperate struggle, we only sank faster. This was the metaphor for our lives, a constant battle against the reality of our own experience, a life of resistance that only deepened our suffering. We have walked a long path since that initial moment of panic. We have journeyed inward, exploring the nature of the sand itself, realizing it as the universal dissatisfaction of dukkha. We investigated the frantic struggle and named it tanha, the feverish thirst for things to be other than they are. We learned to relax our limbs, to feel the pull without fighting it, by understanding the flowing, selfless nature of reality, the great truths of anicca and anatta. We learned to befriend our own inner monsters, and we opened our hearts to the world with compassion. We saw that the obstacle was never the sand, but our relationship to it. And now, we find ourselves in a very different place. The struggle has ceased. We are no longer sinking. By relaxing into the truth of what is, by meeting our reality with a mindful and accepting presence, we have discovered an unexpected buoyancy. We have learned to float. This is the great secret of the path. Peace is not a distant shore we must struggle to reach. It is our own intrinsic nature, a buoyancy that is always present, waiting to support us, the moment we stop fighting. Peace is not the absence of challenges, just as floating is not the absence of water. It is the end of our resistance to the water. It is the simple, profound grace of allowing life to hold us. The core message of this entire journey is this: what you resist persists. What you accept transforms. The energy you spend fighting your anxiety is the very energy that fuels it. The anger you suppress is the anger that poisons you. The past you refuse to accept is the past that imprisons you. The freedom we seek is not found in winning the war against reality, but in the radical act of declaring peace. It is in the wisdom to see that the mud of our suffering is the very nutrient that allows the lotus of awakening to bloom. It is in understanding that the priceless jewel of contentment has been sewn into the fabric of our being from the very beginning. You do not need to become someone else to find this peace. You do not need to adopt a new set of beliefs or a new identity. You have all the tools you need already. The most powerful tool is your own awareness. The most faithful anchor is your own breath. The path does not begin in a monastery in the Himalayas. It begins right here, in this moment, with your next breath. The freedom we have spoken of is not a prize to be won at the end of a long and arduous journey. It is the realization that the door to the cage has been open all along. We were the ones holding it shut. So let go. Let go of the struggle. Feel your breath. Feel your body. Be present to the simple, miraculous, and ever-changing reality of this one precious moment. The journey of 1,000 miles is truly, and only, a journey of a single step, taken again and again, right now.